My name is Callum, and if there's one thing I've learned the hard way, it's that family can be the worst thieves. I used to think betrayal was something that happened in movies, dramatic and far-fetched, but nope. It happens in real life, too, sometimes by the very people you're supposed to trust. And in my case, it was my older brother, Liam. Liam has always been the golden child, the one who could do no wrong in our parents' eyes. If he wanted something, he took it. If he messed up, someone else paid the price. Growing up, I got used to him borrowing my things and never giving them back. Video games, clothes, money from my wallet. And when I complained, I was being selfish. He's your older brother, Callum. He looks out for you, Mom would say, as if taking my stuff was some act of love. Dad wasn't any better. If Liam messed up, I was the scapegoat. If Liam needed help, I was expected to step up. That was just the way things were. I should have known he'd eventually do something worse. I should have been more careful. See, for the past 5 years, I've been saving up for my first house. Every spare dollar went into that fund. I picked up extra shifts, skipped vacations, lived frugally. It wasn't just about owning property, it was about freedom, independence. No more being dragged into Liam's messes, no more being guilt-tripped by our parents. My escape was so close I could taste it. Then, one morning, I checked my account, and my stomach dropped. The money was gone. All of it. At first, I thought it was a mistake. I refreshed the page, checked my transaction history. And that's when I saw it, a huge withdrawal transferred to an account I didn't recognize. Panic turned to confusion. Then, as I clicked through my settings, realization dawned on me like a slow, sickening punch to the gut. Liam. He knew about my savings. And more importantly, he knew about the shared account I'd stupidly kept open from years ago, back when our parents insisted we have one for emergencies. I rarely touched it. But Liam? He must have noticed. And somehow, he still had access. I called him immediately. No answer. I texted. Nothing. My hands were shaking. I drove straight to his place, heart pounding in my chest. The moment he opened the door, I could already tell. That smug, self-satisfied smirk. "Ah, Callum. I was wondering when you'd show up," he said, leaning lazily against the doorframe. "What the hell did you do?" My voice came out sharper than I intended, but I didn't care. Liam shrugged. "Relax. I just borrowed it." Borrowed. I could barely breathe. "That was my house fund. Liam, where is it?" And then, like the absolute bastard he was, he grinned and pulled out his phone. A few swipes, and suddenly, I was staring at a picture, a sleek, brand new sports car, gleaming under the dealership lights. My heart sank. "You don't need a house yet," he said, laughing. "Just be patient." I swear, something inside me snapped right then and there. But instead of yelling, instead of lunging at him like I so desperately wanted to, I went quiet. I turned around and walked away, because I knew if I stayed, I'd do something I couldn't take back. Liam thought he won. He thought I'd just roll over like I always had. But this time, I wasn't going to let it slide. This time, I was going to make him regret everything. For the next few days, I was in a haze. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw that smug look on Liam's face, that damn picture of his new car. My money, years of saving, grinding, sacrificing, all wiped away in an instant because my brother decided he was entitled to it. And the worst part? My parents. I called them, thinking, stupidly, that maybe, just maybe, they'd finally see Liam for what he was. That they'd finally take my side. I should have known better. Mom sighed like I was overreacting. "Callum, it's just money. You can always save up again." "Mom, it wasn't just money. It was everything I had." "You're young," she said, as if that somehow made it better. "You have plenty of time to buy a house. Your brother, he's been struggling lately, you know? He really needed a win." I nearly dropped my phone. A win. He stole from me. He took my money and blew it on a car. Well, there was a long pause. "He said he'd pay you back." I let out a bitter laugh. "And you actually believe that?" Dad finally chimed in, his voice tired. "Callum, we're a family. Families help each other. Maybe this is a lesson for you, to be less materialistic." That was it. That was when I realized. I was alone in this. My parents weren't going to help. Liam wasn't going to magically grow a conscience. If I wanted my money back, I had to take matters into my own hands. And so, I did what Liam never expected. I went quiet. I stopped calling, stopped texting, stopped showing up at family dinners. When Mom asked why I wasn't coming over, I just said I was busy. I knew she'd relay that back to Liam, and I knew he'd assume I was sulking, pouting. that I was just going to get over it like I always had. He had no idea I was planning my revenge. I spent the next week digging. And oh, did I find things. Liam wasn't just careless, he was reckless. That brand new sports car? He didn't just buy it. He financed it under his name. And Liam, being Liam, had terrible credit. That meant sky-high monthly payments. Payments he could barely afford. Then, there was his job, or, rather, the lack of job security. Liam worked in sales, a commission-based gig that was feast or famine. He was already behind on rent. I found eviction notices crumpled up in his trash when I dropped by unexpectedly one day. His landlord hated him, and from the looks of it, he was hanging by a thread. And the final nail in the coffin? Insurance fraud. Liam had told the dealership he'd be using the car for personal use only, which got him a lower rate. But I knew for a fact he was using it for side gigs, sometimes as a private chauffeur for quick cash, sometimes for ride-sharing. All it took was one anonymous tip to his insurance company, and they'd come down on him hard. I had all the pieces. Now, I just had to set them in motion. I started small. First, I made sure his landlord got a little reminder about those late payments. A friendly nudge, just in case they'd forgotten. Then, I placed a call to his insurance provider, acting like a concerned citizen who just happened to notice his car being used for commercial purposes. They assured me they'd look into it. And finally, I waited until Liam was at work before making my move. I walked into the dealership, calm and collected. The salesman who sold him the car was there, a slick-looking guy in a suit. I put on my best polite but frustrated customer face. "Hey, I'm trying to track down some information about a car my brother recently purchased," I said. "There's been a bit of a situation." The guy perked up immediately, all professional charm. "Of course. What seems to be the issue?" I sighed, feigning exasperation. "Well, he told me he paid for it in full, but I found out he actually financed it under his name. Problem is, he used some of my financial information when applying. I'm worried there's been some, let's call it creative paperwork involved." The salesman's expression faltered just a little. That was all I needed. "Now, I'd hate to have to escalate this legally," I continued, lowering my voice. "But I just need to confirm whether my name appears anywhere on that paperwork. If it does, well, I'd have no choice but to report it as fraud. I'm sure you understand." I saw the exact moment the guy started panicking. "Let me just check the system real quick." I waited, watching as he scrolled through Liam's file. I knew my name wasn't there. Liam hadn't been dumb enough to put me down directly, but I also knew something else. Car dealerships hate fraud cases. Even the slightest whiff of it can get a deal reversed. The salesman cleared his throat. "Oh well, I can assure you, sir, that everything was processed according to policy. However, if there's any concern about fraudulent activity, I'd recommend contacting the finance department directly." Bingo. That's all I needed to hear. I nodded, thanked him, and walked out, straight to my car, where I drafted an official-sounding email to the dealership's finance office, CC&G their fraud department. I kept it vague, just enough to raise alarms. Within an hour, I got a response. "Thank you for bringing this to our attention. We take fraudulent applications very seriously and will be reviewing this matter immediately." I smiled. The wheels were in motion now. Liam had no idea what was coming. And the best part? I wasn't even close to done yet. 2 days later, Liam called me. I let it ring. Then again. And again. He never called me this much unless he wanted something. Finally, I answered, keeping my voice casual. "Hey, Liam. What's up?" His voice was tight on edge. "Did you do something?" I raised an eyebrow, even though he couldn't see me. "Do something? About what?" "Don't play dumb, Callum," he snapped. "The dealership just called. They said there's an issue with my financing, and now they're talking about possibly reassessing my loan. And guess what? My insurance just emailed me saying my policy is under review." I almost laughed. That was faster than I expected. "Wow, that sounds serious," I said. "But I'm not sure what that has to do with me." "Liar." Liam practically shouted. "You've been quiet for a week, and now, suddenly, everything's going wrong? I know you had something to do with this." "Liam, you stole from me," I said, my voice steady. "You stole the money I spent years saving up. And instead of apologizing, you rubbed it in my face. You told me to be patient while you drove around in a car you couldn't afford. And now you're mad because karma's finally catching up to you." "Oh, don't give me that self-righteous crap," he scoffed. "You're just being a bitter little brat. Whatever you did, undo it." Now, I let out a slow breath, pretending to think. No, I don't think I will. Callum. Bye, Liam. I hung up. The next day, things got worse for him. I knew because I got another call, this time from my mother. Callum, what did you do? She demanded the second I picked up. Hello to you too, Mom, I said dryly. Don't be sarcastic. Your brother is in trouble. The dealership is threatening to take his car back, and now his landlord is on his case about rent. He said you did something to ruin his credit. I sighed. I didn't ruin his credit, Mom. Liam ruined his credit all on his own by being financially reckless. And maybe if you actually held him accountable for once in his life, he wouldn't be in this mess. You're his brother. You're supposed to help him, not sabotage him. I laughed bitterly. Oh, so when he steals thousands of dollars from me, I'm supposed to just let it go? But when I do something that makes him face the consequences of his actions, suddenly I'm the bad guy? You don't understand, she huffed. He's under a lot of stress right now. And I'm not. I shot back. Do you even care that I lost my entire house fund? Or is Liam's sports car more important than my future? There was a pause. Callum, just fix this. Please. No. I hung up. Now, I knew Liam. I knew he wasn't going to take this lying down. And sure enough, he tried to retaliate. That night, I got a text from an unknown number. You think you're smart? Huh? Watch your back. Real mature. But I wasn't worried. Liam was all bark, no bite. He'd never been able to handle things on his own. He always had someone, usually my parents, cleaning up his messes. But now, there was no one to save him. The next morning, I decided to check in on my handiwork. I made a call to the finance office at the dealership, playing the concerned victim of potential fraud again. The woman on the other end was polite but firm. We've identified some inconsistencies in the application, she told me. At this time, the loan is being reassessed, and pending further investigation, the vehicle may be repossessed if payments cannot be verified. Repossessed. That meant Liam had only a short window before they took his precious car away. But that wasn't all. My little tip to his insurance company had worked. Since he had lied about how he was using the car, his policy was under review. And from what I gathered, there was a high chance they'd either cancel it entirely or jack up his rates so high he couldn't afford them. And then, of course, there was his landlord. I'd made sure they got every single piece of documentation about his late payments. If Liam missed one more, eviction was on the table. Liam was about to lose everything. And yet, I still wasn't done. Because there was one last thing, something that would ensure he had no way out. I took a deep breath, pulled up my email, and drafted one final message. It was time to seal his fate. A few days passed, and I heard nothing from Liam. No calls, no texts. Even my parents went unusually quiet. That meant one thing: he was scrambling, trying to fix the mess he'd made. But I also knew something else. Liam wasn't the type to admit defeat easily. He was either scheming or hoping our parents would step in and fix everything for him. Then, one evening, just as I was getting ready to turn in for the night, there was a loud, rapid knocking at my door. Not a normal knock, more like someone trying to break it down. I already knew who it was. With a sigh, I walked over and pulled the door open. There he stood, Liam, looking absolutely furious. His normally well-groomed hair was disheveled, his expensive jacket slightly wrinkled, and his expression was a mix of rage and panic. His eyes were practically bulging out of his skull. You ruined my life, he exploded, shoving his way inside before I could stop him. I let out a slow breath, closing the door behind him. And hello to you too, Liam. Don't start with me, Callum, he growled. You know exactly what you did. I leaned against the wall, arms crossed. You mean making sure you face the consequences of your own actions? Yeah, I do know what I did. And you deserved every bit of it. They're taking my car, he shouted, pacing like a caged animal. The dealership called today and said my loan was under review, and guess what? Turns out lying on an application is a big deal. Who knew? He let out a bitter laugh before whirling on me. Oh, and my insurance? Canceled. Just like that. They said I committed fraud or whatever. And my landlord? They're threatening eviction because apparently they don't like tenants who habitually fail to meet payment deadlines. I wonder who sent them that info. I didn't answer. He already knew. You had no right, he continued, stepping closer, his voice shaking with fury. None of this had anything to do with you. I scoffed. Oh, really? Because last I checked, you stole thousands of dollars from me. That money was supposed to be for my house, Liam. My future. And you took it like it was nothing, just so you could show off in some flashy car. And the worst part? You weren't even sorry. You laughed in my face. I was going to pay you back, he snapped. When? I shot back. Be specific. He opened his mouth, then shut it. We both knew the truth. He was never going to pay me back. Not unless he absolutely had to. He exhaled sharply, his hands clenching into fists at his sides. Fine. You got your little revenge. You made your point. Now fix it. I stared at him, my expression unreadable. Fix what? Call the dealership. Tell them it was a mistake. No. Call the insurance company. Say you lied. No. Call my landlord and no. His nostrils flared. Callum, I swear. You swear what? I cut him off, my voice dangerously calm. What are you going to do, Liam? Steal from me again? You've already taken everything I worked for. And now that things aren't going your way, you want me to clean up your mess? Not happening. Liam let out a frustrated noise and threw himself onto my couch, rubbing his temples like this was also stressful for him. I can't believe this, he muttered. I was supposed to be set. Everything was perfect. And now I have nothing. You know what's crazy? I said, my voice eerily light. You still could have had everything. You could have just asked me for a loan. We could have worked something out. But instead, you decided to be greedy. And now you're broke. He didn't respond. A moment of silence stretched between us. Then, finally, he exhaled through his nose and sat up, looking at me with something new in his expression. Something calculating. Okay, he said slowly. How much? I blinked. What? How much do you want? He asked, his tone forcefully casual. To undo all of this. Name your price. I laughed. I actually laughed. You seriously think you can buy your way out of this? Everything has a price, he shot back. I shook my head. Not this time. His jaw clenched. He was losing control of the situation, and he knew it. Then, as if on cue, my phone buzzed. I glanced at it. An email. From my bank. The subject line? Incoming wire transfer received. I clicked it open, and there it was. The full amount of my stolen money, every last cent, back in my account. I stared at it for a long moment before turning the screen toward him. What's this? Liam didn't meet my eyes. I had to borrow it, he mumbled. Took out a loan. Just undo everything now. I smiled, slipping my phone back into my pocket. No. His head snapped up. What? I got my money back. But that doesn't mean I'm letting you off the hook. You're still going to lose everything, Liam. And maybe, just maybe, when you hit rock bottom, you'll finally understand what it feels like. Liam shot up from the couch, his face red with rage. You smug little, I held up a hand. Leave, Liam. We're done here. He stood there, breathing heavily, his hands twitching like he wanted to punch something. But he didn't. Because he knew, this time, there was nothing he could do. Finally, he turned on his heel and stormed out, slamming the door so hard that the walls shook. I let out a slow breath, sinking onto my couch. I had my money back. Liam was about to lose everything. And for the first time in a long time, I felt peaceful. But that peace didn't last long. Because, as I had predicted, Liam wasn't done. At first, it was little things. He'd call from different numbers, leaving angry voicemails about how I'd ruined his life, and how I didn't understand what I'd done. I blocked him each time. Then, my parents started calling, demanding to know why Liam was in such a mess. You took it too far, Callum. My mom scolded over the phone. He's your brother. You should be helping him, not tearing him down. I laughed bitterly. Helping him? Like how he helped himself to my savings. That was different, she huffed. He made a mistake. You didn't have to go and destroy his life over it. I pinched the bridge of my nose. Mom, I didn't destroy his life. He did. I just made sure he couldn't get away with it. Well, your father, and I think you should fix it. If you really cared about family, you'd talk to the bank, the dealership, do something to help him. I shook my head. No, I've already done more than enough. If Liam wants to fix his life, he can do it himself. She sputtered, but I ended the call before she could guilt-trip me further. They would never see things my way. I had finally accepted that. But Liam? He wasn't done yet. A few nights later, I woke up to a loud bang outside my apartment. My stomach dropped as I rushed to my window, and sure enough, there was Liam, standing next to my car. He had a baseball bat in his hands, his whole body tense with rage. Before he could take another swing, I grabbed my phone and called the cops. By the time they arrived, he had shattered both my side mirrors and left a deep dent in the driver's door. But the real kicker? When the officers asked him why he did it, he went on a whole rant about how I ruined his life and that this was payback. They didn't like that answer. Liam was arrested for vandalism and property damage. My insurance covered the repairs, and with the police report, I wasn't on the hook for a dime. But Liam? He now had legal fees to deal with on top of everything else. And this time, there was no one to bail him out. My parents begged me to drop the charges, but I refused. Liam needed to learn that actions had consequences. And when the court date finally came, he looked more defeated than I had ever seen him. His expensive clothes were gone, replaced by something much more modest. The arrogance was gone too. When the judge asked if I had anything to say, I simply said, "I just want my brother to finally take responsibility for his actions." That was the last time I saw Liam in person. From what I heard, he had to sell what little he had left to cover his legal costs. The car was gone. His fancy lifestyle? Gone. He moved back in with my parents, who were now also struggling with money since they had been helping him. He tried getting a job, but with his track record, it wasn't easy. And eventually, the call stopped. I guess he finally realized I wasn't going to save him. As for me, I put my money back into my savings, and a few months later, I finally bought my first home, the one I had been dreaming about before Liam stole from me. And let me tell you, walking through that front door, knowing I had earned it, knowing no one could take it from me, it felt better than any revenge ever could. So, what do you think? Was I too harsh? Should I have forgiven him? Or did he finally get what he deserved? Let me know. My name is Liam, and if there's one thing I've learned in life, it's that family isn't always who you can count on. A year ago, I made a decision that changed everything. I quit my dead-end job and started my own online business. I knew it wasn't going to be easy, but I was ready to grind. I had saved up a little money, done my research, and had a solid plan. My family, on the other hand, thought it was the dumbest thing they had ever heard. I still remember the way they laughed when I told them. We were sitting around the dinner table, and I had just worked up the courage to announce it. My own business? My mom snorted. "Liam, you can't even keep your room clean. What makes you think you can run a company?" My dad chuckled, shaking his head. "You need a real job, son. Something with benefits. Look at your brother. Nathan, he's doing it right." Yes, my older brother Nathan, the golden child. He had a stable job, a nice car, and the undying approval of our parents. Compared to him, I was nothing. Nathan smirked at me from across the table. "So what are you selling? Get-rich-quick schemes?" I gritted my teeth. "No, I've been learning digital marketing. I'm starting an e-commerce site." And I didn't even get to finish before they all burst into laughter. "You? E-commerce?" My mom wiped a tear from her eye. "Oh, this is rich. You don't even have a business degree," my dad scoffed. "You'll be crawling back in a few months, begging for help." That night, I went to bed feeling humiliated, but also more determined than ever. I was going to prove them wrong. The next few months were brutal. I worked insane hours, living off instant noodles and caffeine while pouring everything I had into my business. There were times when I thought they might be right, that maybe I should just give up and get a real job. But every time I doubted myself, I remembered their laughter. That was all the fuel I needed. Then, about a year later, everything changed. One morning, I woke up, checked my sales dashboard, and nearly dropped my coffee. I had just crossed 6 figures in revenue. I had done it. I had built something real. And that's when my family came back into the picture. It started small. A few passive-aggressive comments from my mom like, "Oh, I guess your little project is actually working." Then my dad, suddenly curious about what I was doing. And of course, Nathan, who went from mocking me to suddenly being so supportive of my entrepreneurial spirit. Then came the requests. At first, it was just little things. My mom wanted me to help out with some bills. My dad hinted that his car needed repairs. Nathan joked about how, since you're rich now, you should take your big brother out for a fancy dinner. At first, I brushed it off. I figured they were just testing the waters, seeing if I'd actually hand over money. I had no problem treating them to dinner or helping out with a bill here and there. After all, despite everything, they were still my family. But then, things escalated. Fast. One evening, my mom called me out of the blue. "Liam, sweetie, we need to talk." I could already hear the tone in her voice, the same one she used when she was about to guilt-trip me into doing something. "What's up?" I asked. "Well," she sighed dramatically. "Your father and I have been struggling a bit financially. It's nothing major, but we were thinking, since you're doing so well now, maybe you could help us out. You know, just until we get back on our feet." I frowned. "How much are we talking?" "Oh, not much," she said quickly. "Just $20,000. I almost dropped my phone. "20,000? Yes, sweetheart. And it's not like we wouldn't pay you back. You know we always support you. I nearly laughed at the irony. They always supported me? Yeah, right? I hesitated for a second before responding. I don't know, Mom. That's a lot of money. What do you even need it for? There was a long pause. Then she cleared her throat. Well, your father and I were thinking about remodeling the kitchen. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. It wasn't for medical bills. It wasn't for an emergency. They just wanted to upgrade their damn kitchen. Mom, I'm sorry, but that's not something I can just, Liam, she snapped, her voice turning cold. You owe us. We raised you, fed you, gave you a roof over your head. The least you can do is help your family. There it was. The classic guilt trip. I sighed. I appreciate everything you did for me growing up, but that doesn't mean I'm a bank. Before she could respond, I heard my dad in the background. What's taking so long? Tell him we'll take 30 if he's feeling generous. 30. I hung up. That should have been the end of it. But of course, it wasn't. The next day, I got a text from Nathan. Nathan texted, Yo, heard about Mom and Dad. Kinda messed up that you won't help. I replied, They want money for a kitchen remodel, Nathan. Nathan texted, So? There are parents. If I made as much as you, I'd help them in a heartbeat. I responded, Then you give them the money. Nathan texted, I don't have it. I replied, Exactly. He left me on read after that. But the real explosion happened that weekend. I was at home, enjoying a rare day off, when I heard loud knocking at my door. I checked my phone, no texts, no calls. My stomach twisted. I already knew who it was. Sure enough, when I opened the door, there they were. My parents. My brother. And oh, great, my aunt and uncle, who had somehow been dragged into this mess. I barely had time to react before my mom shoved past me and marched into my living room like she owned the place. My dad followed, looking pissed, and Nathan just stood there with his arms crossed like he was about to watch a boxing match. Behind them, my aunt and uncle lingered in the doorway, clearly dragged into this drama for backup. I exhaled sharply. What is this? Mom spun around, her hands on her hips. Liam, we need to have a serious discussion about your selfishness. I pinched the bridge of my nose. You showed up at my house. Unannounced. Dad scoffed. Yeah, because you refused to help your own family. I folded my arms. I offered to help when you actually needed it. But I'm not giving you 30 grand for a damn kitchen. Mom's face turned red. You're being dramatic. Oh, I'm being dramatic? I let out a dry laugh. You're the ones banging on my door demanding money like I owe you something. Nathan finally spoke up. Dude, it's not a big deal. You're making bank now. You could give them the money and not even feel it. I turned to him. Oh, so if it's not a big deal, why don't you take out a loan for them? Nathan shifted uncomfortably. That's different. I shook my head. Of course it is. That's when my uncle decided to chime in. Liam, in our culture, we take care of our family. It's not just about money, it's about respect. I clenched my jaw. Respect? You mean like how they laughed in my face when I told them I was starting a business? How they told me I'd fail? That kind of respect. My mom threw her hands up. Oh my God, Liam, are you seriously still mad about that? We were just joking. And look, you proved us wrong. You should be grateful we motivated you. I stared at her in disbelief. You don't get to mock me, bet against me, then take credit when I succeed. She huffed. So this is how you treat your own mother? After everything we did for you? Dad shook his head. I told you this was a mistake. He's always been selfish. I felt something in me snap. You think I'm selfish? I worked my ass off for a year to build something for myself while you sat there and laughed. Now, because I actually made it, I suddenly owe you. I gestured toward the door. Get out. Mom gasped. Excuse me. You heard me, I said, my voice cold. Get out. For a moment, there was silence. My mom looked genuinely shocked, like it had never occurred to her that I might not just roll over and give them whatever they wanted. Then her face twisted into something ugly. Fine. But don't come crying to us when you realize family is all you have. I scoffed. Funny. You didn't seem to think that when you were laughing at me a year ago. She stormed out, my dad right behind her, muttering something under his breath. Nathan shot me a glare before following. My aunt and uncle lingered awkwardly for a second before shuffling after them. And just like that, they were gone. I closed the door and exhaled, my heart still racing. I knew this wasn't over. Not by a long shot. Because if there's one thing I've learned about my family, it's that they don't give up that easily. For the next few days, I didn't hear a word from them. No calls, no texts, nothing. It was weird. My family wasn't the type to just drop something like this. If anything, I expected them to double down. But instead, it was radio silence. At first, I thought maybe they'd finally taken the hint. Maybe they'd realized I wasn't going to give in and decided to leave me alone. Maybe I was free. But I should have known better. The peace didn't last long. A week later, I woke up to nearly 20 missed calls from my mom and a flurry of texts from Nathan. My stomach sank. Nathan, bro, you seriously messed up this time. Mom's crying. Dad's furious. You need to fix this. They're saying you took it too far. I stared at my phone, confused. Took what too far? Before I could even reply, my phone started buzzing again. Mom. I let it ring. Then Dad. Ignored. Then Nathan. Ignored. Then I got a message from my aunt. Aunt Sarah texted, Liam, I don't know what's going on, but your parents are telling everyone you're abandoning them after everything they did for you. They're really upset. Call them. I groaned and threw my phone on the bed. So that's their game now. They couldn't manipulate me, so they were trying to turn the rest of the family against me. Classic. A few hours later, I finally gave in and picked up when Nathan called again. What? I said flatly. Dude, what is wrong with you? He snapped. Be more specific. You insulted Mom and Dad and now they're devastated. I let out a dry laugh. Devastated? Because I wouldn't give them 30 grand for a kitchen? Nathan sighed heavily. You don't get it. It's not about the money. It's about family. You're rubbing your success in their faces and acting like they don't matter. I clenched my jaw. I'm rubbing it in their faces? Nathan, they were the ones who mocked me for starting my business. They told me I was an idiot and that I'd fail. Now that I didn't fail, they suddenly feel entitled to my money. And when I said no, they ran to the whole family to make me look like the bad guy. Nathan was silent for a moment. Look, I get it, he finally said. They were wrong to doubt you. But dude, you're rich now. 30 grand is nothing to you. I shook my head. That's not the point. It's my money. They don't get to insult me and then expect a payout. Nathan exhaled sharply. Whatever, man. Just know everyone's talking about you. Mom and Dad told Grandma, and now she's pissed. Uncle Mike thinks you're greedy. Even Aunt Sarah is saying you're being harsh. I rolled my eyes. Of course they brought Grandma into this. She was the ultimate emotional weapon. Liam, Nathan said, his voice quieter. Just come over and talk to them. If you don't, things are gonna get ugly. I already knew things were ugly. But something told me this was only the beginning. Against my better judgment, I agreed. I was about to walk into the lion's den. When I pulled up to my parents' house, I could already tell this was going to be a disaster. My mom's car was in the driveway, along with Dad's. But there were more cars than usual. Nathan hadn't mentioned this was turning into a family intervention. I knocked once before pushing the door open. The second I stepped inside, I was hit with the heavy scent of Mom's signature vanilla candles, probably lit to make everything feel warm and welcoming. Too bad it didn't work. I walked into the living room and saw them all sitting there. Mom, Dad, Nathan, Aunt Sarah, Uncle Mike, and, of course, Grandma. Mom was the first to speak. Liam, she said, putting on her best heartbroken mother face. We need to talk. I stayed standing. About how you tried to turn the whole family against me? Dad scoffed. Jesus, Liam, cut the attitude. We wouldn't have to tell them anything if you weren't being so damn selfish. I crossed my arms. Right. Because I'm the selfish one here. Grandma shook her head in disappointment. Liam, sweetheart, I don't understand. Your parents gave you everything. And now, when they need you, you refuse to help. I clenched my jaw. Grandma, I did offer to help. I was fine with paying a bill, helping them out if there was an actual emergency. But they don't need help. They want money for a kitchen remodel. And when I said no, they ran to you guys to make me look bad. Mom gasped. That's not true. I turned to her. Oh, then tell me, Mom, did you or did you not tell Grandma that I was abandoning you? She opened her mouth, then shut it. I smirked. Yeah, that's what I thought. Uncle Mike leaned forward. Liam, this isn't just about the money. It's about principle. Your family supported you your whole life. I let out a sharp laugh. Supported me? When? When they laughed at my business? When they told me to get a real job like Nathan? When they mocked me for taking a risk? Aunt Sarah frowned. Families joke around. Liam, it doesn't mean they don't love you. I turned to Nathan. What about you, Nathan? You think I owe them? He hesitated. I mean, yeah, a little. I stared at him. You're serious? He shifted uncomfortably. Dude, they raised us. They sacrificed for us. It's not crazy to think you'd give back. Giving back is one thing, but this isn't giving back. This is extortion. Dad's face darkened. Watch it, boy. I didn't back down. Or what? You'll cut me out of the family? Newsflash, I was never really in it to begin with. You made that clear when you laughed in my face a year ago. Silence. Mom's lip trembled. Liam, don't say that. You are part of this family. I sighed. Then start acting like it. Family doesn't treat each other like ATMs. Family doesn't manipulate and guilt trip. Family doesn't turn everyone against one person just because they didn't get their way. Nobody said a word. Then Dad let out a sharp breath. You know what? Fine. If you want to be so ungrateful, go ahead. But don't come crawling back when you realize money can't buy you a family. I stared at him. You've already made it clear that I don't have one. And with that, I turned around and walked out the door. As I got into my car, I knew this wasn't over. Not by a long shot. Because something told me they still weren't done trying to get what they wanted. And next time, they wouldn't be so subtle. I had spent the next few weeks bracing myself for what I knew was coming. My family wasn't the type to let things slide, especially when money was involved. At first, it started off subtly. Some distant cousins began giving me cold shoulders. There were a few awkward replies in the family group chat. But soon enough, it escalated. My grandma stopped responding to my texts. Aunt Sarah, who I thought was somewhat reasonable, unfriended me on Facebook. Then came the email from my dad, the one that made my heart drop. It was CC'd to nearly every relative on both sides of the family. Subject: disowning a disgrace, Liam, your behavior has shown us your true colors. You have made it clear that money matters more to you than family. You have humiliated us, turned your back on the people who raised you, and refused to show an ounce of gratitude for the sacrifices we made. Since you no longer wish to be part of this family, we are making it official. Do not contact us again. I stared at the email for what felt like an eternity. My hands clenched into fists. Unbelievable. This was their final move, the ultimate guilt trip. They wanted to paint me as the villain, as if I had abandoned them, when all I had done was try to build a life of my own. Yet, despite everything, I couldn't help but feel a twinge of hurt. I'd held on to the faint hope that, maybe, just maybe, they would come around. That they would understand that my business wasn't just a passing phase, but something I was passionate about. That they'd see I wasn't some failure. But now, this email shattered that illusion completely. They wanted me gone? Fine. But they were about to regret it. I wasn't going to let this slide. If they wanted to paint me as the bad guy, then I was going to tell the full story. So, I spent the next couple of hours writing up the most honest, unapologetic email of my life. Subject: the truth. Since my own parents have decided to blast me to the entire family, I think it's only fair that everyone knows the full story. For those of you who don't know, my parents and brother mocked me when I started my business. They called me a failure, told me to get a real job like Nathan. They laughed when I struggled. Now, 1 year later, that same business is successful. And suddenly, they believe they deserve a cut. They didn't need help with bills. They didn't need money to survive. They wanted $30,000 for a luxury kitchen remodel. When I refused, they ran to everyone they could and painted me as a greedy monster. But let's be clear, this was never about family. This was about control. They don't care about me. They care about what I can give them. And now that I've finally set boundaries, they're throwing a tantrum like spoiled children. If any of you still believe their sob story, that's your choice. But I won't be manipulated, and I won't be guilt-tripped. Mom, Dad, Nathan, I hope your new kitchen is worth it. Goodbye. I hit send and waited. And let me tell you, the fallout was something else. The first call came from Aunt Sarah. She was furious, but not at me. I knew something was off, she said. They made it sound like you just cut them off for no reason. Then Grandma called. Liam, sweetheart, I had no idea they were treating you like that. I'm so sorry. One by one, family members began reaching out. Some were apologizing for believing the lies. Others just wanted to gossip. But the best part? People started to turn against my parents. Uncle Mike, who had always been one of their biggest defenders, sent me a text. He said, I don't blame you. That's insane. Nathan, on the other hand, was furious. He texted, nice job, you just embarrassed Mom and Dad in front of everyone. I responded, they embarrassed themselves. He texted back, you could have just ignored them, but no, you had to be dramatic. You've completely ruined your relationship with them. I stared at his message, a smirk forming on my lips. Ruined my relationship with them? Good. That email was the final nail in the coffin. My parents went on the attack, cutting off all contact with me. No more guilt trips. No more manipulative messages. Nathan, always their golden child, stuck by their side, but by this point, I didn't care. Meanwhile, half the family was on my side. The other half stayed neutral, but one thing became painfully clear. My parents' perfect reputation was shattered. And as for me, I was finally free. For the first time in my life, I didn't need to prove myself. I didn't need to seek their approval or constantly fight for their respect. I didn't need to be their punching bag. I was done. And it felt incredibly good. In the end, I realized I didn't need to sacrifice my happiness or my goals just to keep the peace with a family that only saw me as a means to an end. The emotional weight lifted once I cut ties with them. It was painful at first, but ultimately, it was the best decision I ever made. Now, my business is thriving, and I'm finally living life on my terms. No more guilt, no more manipulation. What do you all think? Did I handle this the right way, or should I have tried a different approach? I'm curious to hear your thoughts. My name is Nathan, I'm 29, and if you'd asked me 2 years ago what I thought Christmas meant, I probably would have given you a generic answer. Family, food, laughter, traditions. But after last year, the holiday carries a different weight for me. It was the night I sat at a long wooden dining table, across from the very people who raised me, who were supposed to love me unconditionally, and felt myself shrink under their laughter. Not the warm, good-natured kind either. The sharp, mocking laughter that cuts you open and leaves you pretending to smile while your insides twist into knots. I grew up in a family where success was measured in very traditional ways. A steady job, benefits, maybe a mortgage before you hit 30. My dad worked in finance his whole life and practically worshipped the 9-to-5 grind. My mom ran the house like an office, strict schedules, no wasted time. My older sister, Claire, became a lawyer, which instantly made her the golden child. My younger brother, Jason, went into accounting and was treated like he had single-handedly saved the family from ruin. And me? I took a different path. I didn't want to be boxed into the corporate machine, so I started a small online business. At first, it was nothing more than an idea, a little side project I worked on in my cramped apartment late into the night, while they all told me I was wasting my life. By the time Christmas rolled around last year, I've been working tirelessly on my startup for nearly 3 years. It was finally starting to gain traction, but I wasn't rolling in money yet. I didn't brag about it much at family gatherings. I knew they wouldn't understand. Still, part of me hoped they might at least respect the effort, the grind, the sheer persistence it took to keep building something from nothing. But instead, when my uncle casually asked me how work was going and I explained I was still running my business, the room fell silent for just a moment. Then my sister scoffed. My dad smirked. And my mom, my own mother, let out a laugh that set everyone else off. "You'll never make real money doing that," she said, waving her wine glass like she was dismissing a child's daydream. "It's a hobby, not a career. You need to get serious before it's too late." Jason leaned back in his chair, a smug grin plastered on his face. "Maybe you should shadow me at my firm for a few weeks. Get a taste of what stability feels like." Even my cousins chimed in, cracking jokes about me selling internet lemonade stands or wasting my 20s on a pipe dream. They laughed so hard one of them actually snorted into their mashed potatoes. I sat there, heat rising in my face, trying to swallow my pride along with the dry turkey on my plate. I wanted to defend myself, to shout that they didn't understand what I was building. But the words stuck in my throat. What was the point? They'd already decided I was a failure. That night, lying in the old childhood bed my mom still kept made up like a shrine to simpler times, I stared at the ceiling and promised myself something. One day, they'd regret mocking me. Not because I'd rub their noses in my success, but because the way they treated me would mean they wouldn't be welcome to share in it when it came. Fast forward to yesterday. My company closed its first major deal, a contract worth $2.7 million. When I saw the number clear as day in my account, I sat frozen for a moment, the magnitude of it sinking in. All those nights of working until dawn, all those moments I thought about quitting but didn't, it had finally paid off. And almost as if on cue, my phone started buzzing. Calls, texts, emails. Family members who hadn't spoken to me in months suddenly flooding my inbox with congratulations that didn't feel congratulatory at all. Jason's message came first. "Heard the news. Congrats, little bro. We should celebrate. Also, since I gave you advice along the way, I think it's only fair I get a small share." Just 10%, nothing crazy. Then Claire, so proud of you, Nathan. Remember, I supported you when no one else did, a bold-faced lie. Maybe you could help pay off my law school loans? Just a suggestion. And my mom, the same woman who had laughed at me last Christmas, sent a voice message saying, Nathan, we're so happy for you. Of course, none of this would have been possible without the values we instilled in you. We'll talk soon about how you can give back to the family. Give back. As if they hadn't already taken enough from me with their mockery and disdain. The calls haven't stopped since. They keep stacking up, each one more entitled than the last. The words "we deserve" and "you owe us" appearing more times than I can count. I've been sitting with it all day, letting their audacity sink in. Part of me feels the old ache, that childlike craving for my parents' approval, the urge to make them proud. But another, stronger part of me, the part forged in those long nights of doubt and loneliness, remembers exactly how they treated me when they thought I'd never succeed. And so here I am, staring at my buzzing phone, knowing exactly how I'm about to respond. But before I tell you what I did, I need to explain just how deep this family dynamic runs, because this isn't just about money. It never was. The thing about family is, when they think they have the upper hand, they don't even try to hide their favoritism or cruelty. That Christmas wasn't the first time I'd been the punchline. It was just the loudest. But now that money was on the table, the true colors were bleeding through in every call and message. And believe me, they weren't pretty. I'll never forget the first call I actually answered, mostly out of morbid curiosity. It was my dad. He didn't start with congratulations. He didn't even ask how I was doing. His very first words were, Nathan, you need to come by the house this weekend. We need to sit down and figure out how you're going to handle the money responsibly. The way he said it, like I was still some teenager blowing allowance money on video games, made my blood boil. Dad, I've been handling my business just fine, I said, trying to keep my voice level. You think you have, but this is serious money, he replied, with that patronizing chuckle he always used when he thought I was out of my depth. This isn't your little website experiment anymore. You're not capable of managing millions. But your mother and I, we know what to do with it. We'll take care of it, make sure it grows. It'll benefit the whole family. The whole family. Not me. Not the person who had stayed up nights, sacrificed weekends, lived off instant noodles just to get here. No, in his mind, my work, my success, belonged to everyone but me. Then came my mom. She didn't ask, she demanded. Nathan, you're coming over Sunday. Don't argue. She even dangled her favorite line, the one she'd used my whole life whenever I resisted her control. Family comes first. Always. But her version of family always seemed to mean everyone else comes before Nathan. And if my parents' entitlement wasn't enough, my siblings quickly followed suit. Jason, who had mocked me mercilessly at Christmas, suddenly reinvented himself as my biggest supporter. He called 3 times in one afternoon. The first time, he claimed he'd always believed in me. The second time, he suggested that since he was good with numbers, he should be the one managing my accounts. By the third call, he wasn't even subtle anymore. Look, bro, I helped inspire you. You owe me a cut. Just send me something small. 50 grand. That's nothing to you now. Claire, meanwhile, took a different route, emotional manipulation. Nathan, you know how hard law school was for me. I sacrificed everything. I deserve some recognition for that. And don't forget all the times I drove you places when you didn't have a car. As if a few rides in high school meant she was entitled to my livelihood. It wasn't just my immediate family either. Word had spread to my aunts, uncles, and even cousins I hadn't spoken to in years. One cousin messaged me, Hey man, congrats on the deal. Could you loan me $10,000? Just until I get back on my feet. Another one wrote, We're family, so I know you'll take care of us. Maybe set up a fund for all of us. It's only fair. But the one that really broke me came from my mom again. She left a voice message, and I swear I played it 3 times because I couldn't believe what I was hearing. She said, Nathan, don't be selfish. You know we invested in you. Every meal we fed you. Every dollar we spent raising you. That was an investment. Now it's time for you to give us our return. Your father and I worked too hard to not see the payoff. I sat there with the phone in my hand, shaking. An investment? That's what I was to them. Not a son, not a brother. An investment waiting to pay dividends. And of course, the comparisons started creeping back in. Jason bragged about how his boss had heard of my deal and said, guess success runs in the family. He actually told me, with a straight face, "You're only able to do this because we set the example. You should be grateful." Claire jumped on the same bandwagon, saying, "Your company only worked because you grew up in a house with discipline. Without us, you'd be nowhere." The worst part? They didn't just want money. They wanted control. My dad tried to set up a family meeting at their house, insisting I bring all the documents so he could review them. My mom hinted that I should buy a bigger house closer to them so I could host the holidays properly. Jason floated the idea of me investing in his accounting firm. Claire outright said I should pay off her student loans because if one of us is weighed down, we're all weighed down. It was like they thought my success was a family lottery win, and they were all holding winning tickets. The pressure was suffocating. Every call, every text, every voicemail chipped away at me, dragging me back into that role they had carved for me years ago. The afterthought, the one who wasn't good enough, the one who had to fight for scraps of their approval. Except now the scraps they wanted weren't emotional. They wanted millions. And yet, despite the anger boiling inside me, I stayed silent. I listened. I let them talk. Because while they thought they were pulling me back under their thumb, I was already making a plan. But before I get to that, you need to understand just how far their entitlement was about to go, because the real breaking point hadn't even come yet. It was only a matter of time before they crossed the one line you can never come back from. If the constant calls and demands were like water slowly dripping into a glass, what happened next was the flood that finally spilled everything over. I didn't see it coming, not at first. I thought their entitled comments and shameless requests were bad enough. But when people like my family smell money, they don't stop at asking. They take. It started small. One morning, about 2 weeks after I signed the deal, I noticed an email from my bank flagged as important. It said there had been multiple failed login attempts on my account. I brushed it off at first, thinking maybe it was some bot or scammer. But then, later that day, I got a call directly from the bank's fraud department. Someone had been trying to use my personal details to gain access, not just to view my account, but to change the linked recovery information. When I asked who, the banker hesitated before saying, "It looks like the attempts were made using security questions, things only close family would likely know." My stomach dropped. Who else but my parents and siblings would know the name of my first pet, or the street I grew up on, or my high school mascot? I wanted to believe it was a coincidence, but the pit in my gut told me the truth. My own family had tried to get into my account. I didn't confront them immediately. Instead, I decided to wait, to see if they'd slip. And sure enough, they did. A few nights later, I got a group text from my mom, of all people. It wasn't even subtle. She wrote, "We had a little trouble getting into your account today, but don't worry, we'll figure it out. It's just too risky for you to handle this money alone. We need to make sure it's protected." I sat there staring at the screen, heart pounding in my ears. They hadn't even tried to hide it. To them, breaking into my account wasn't theft. It was them protecting me. I typed back a single word, "What?" Almost instantly, my dad called. His voice was steady, almost rehearsed. "Nathan, listen. You're not mature enough to manage that kind of money. It'll destroy you. We've seen people lose everything because they didn't have guidance. We're your parents. We're supposed to step in. We already agreed that the best way forward is for you to give us access. Just for now. We'll take care of everything. You can focus on your little projects while we handle the serious stuff." The way he said, "we already agreed," sent a chill down my spine. They had actually sat together, my parents, my siblings, probably even extended family, and had a discussion about how to divvy up my success like vultures circling over a meal. That night, Jason sent me a smug text. "Once Dad and Mom have access, I'll help invest some of it. Don't worry, bro, I'll make sure it grows. You'll thank us later." And then Claire, sweet, high-achieving Claire, called me, voice dripping with false sympathy. "Nathan, don't make this harder than it needs to be. You know you can't handle the stress of all this money. Let us take over. Don't embarrass yourself by clinging to it. We're family. Family shares. Family shares." I can't even describe what that moment felt like. It wasn't just betrayal. It was erasure. They were trying to strip me of my independence, my identity, the very thing I had spent years building when no one believed in me. And they were doing it with the same smug certainty they'd always used when telling me I wasn't enough. That was the night I hit the emotional turning point. I didn't just feel angry. I felt cold. Something inside me hardened. Because in that moment, I realized that they didn't see me as a son, a brother, or even a person. They saw me as a bank, a resource to be mined until it was empty. I didn't tell them I knew what they had done. I didn't yell or scream. Instead, I let them think they were winning. I let them talk about meetings and plans, about allocating funds and setting limits, all while I quietly began pulling away. Because if they thought I was going to hand over everything I had worked for, they were about to learn just how wrong they were. But before I tell you what I started planning, you need to see just how far down they dragged me, how close I came to losing everything before I found the strength to turn it around. When you grow up being the family's punchline, you develop thick skin. You learn to absorb the little jabs, the dismissive laughter, the quiet sighs of disappointment. But nothing had ever cut as deep as realizing my own parents had actively tried to take what I had built. That betrayal didn't just sting, it hollowed me out. For weeks after discovering the attempted account breach, I carried a heaviness that clung to me like a shadow. I'd lie awake in my apartment, staring at the ceiling while my phone lit up again and again with their calls, their messages, their carefully worded reminders about responsibility and family duty. I stopped answering most of them, but even silence seemed to fuel their narrative. Suddenly, I was the selfish one, the ungrateful child, the unstable dreamer, hoarding money that wasn't really mine. The isolation was brutal. You have to understand, I didn't have much of a support system outside of them. For so long, I'd been the black sheep, too busy working odd hours on my business to build a wide circle of friends. My siblings had their colleagues, my parents had their country club dinners, and I had my laptop, my apartment, and the faint hope that one day it would all mean something. Now, with $2.7 million sitting in my account, I should have felt triumphant. Instead, I felt lonelier than I ever had before. I stopped going out. I barely ate. I avoided social media because every time I logged in, I saw their faces smiling in group photos I hadn't been invited to, captions like, "Family is everything," mocking me from the screen. Meanwhile, texts piled up. Jason sent one that read, "Don't drag this out. Just let us handle the money before you ruin it." Claire tried to guilt trip me. "I can't believe you're shutting out the people who raised you. Mom's been crying all week." And my dad left a voicemail saying, "If you don't come home soon, we'll have to take steps to protect you from yourself." Protect me from myself. Those words played on a loop in my head, the same way they'd always justified controlling me. When I was a kid, it was about who I was allowed to hang out with. When I was a teenager, it was about what college I should attend. Now, as an adult, it was about the fortune I had worked for. And maybe the worst part? Some small, fragile part of me still wanted their approval. Some childlike corner of my heart whispered, "If you just give in, if you just let them take control, they'll finally love you." That voice nearly broke me. I found myself second-guessing everything. Was I really capable of managing this money? Was I selfish for not wanting to share? Was I ungrateful for ignoring their calls? There were nights I nearly picked up the phone, nearly caved, nearly handed them the keys to everything I had. That was rock bottom. Not just the loneliness, not just the weight of betrayal, but the realization that after everything they'd done, I still ached for their approval. But then something shifted. One night, I pulled out an old notebook I used to scribble business ideas in back when the company was nothing but a dream. The pages were filled with messy sketches, half-baked plans, lists of things I wanted for the future. On one page, in bold letters I had written during one particularly low night years ago, I saw the words, "Do this for you." I stared at those words until my eyes burned. For me, not for them. Not for their approval, not for their applause. For me. That was the night I decided I couldn't keep playing defense. If they were going to keep pushing, I had to start quietly pulling away. I began researching financial advisors, real ones, vetted, trustworthy, with no ties to my family. I opened separate accounts, moved portions of the money, set up safeguards. I started reading about trusts, about legal protections, about how people with actual wealth shielded themselves from greedy relatives. It was overwhelming, yes, but it was empowering, too. At the same time, I started creating distance. I stopped replying to every message. I let their calls go unanswered. I knew it made them furious, but I couldn't give them access to my mind the way they wanted. Slowly, my silence became my shield. And yet, even as I started laying the groundwork to protect myself, the storm on their side only grew. The guilt tripping turned into threats. The veiled concern sharpened into ultimatums. They weren't just circling anymore. They were moving in for the kill. And when they finally made their boldest move yet, it pushed me past the point of no return. That was the moment I stopped being the quiet, hesitant son they could push around and started becoming something else entirely. When I look back at that dark stretch, what stands out isn't the loneliness or even the betrayal. It's the exact moment I stopped letting their voices define me. Rock bottom has a strange clarity to it. Once you've been stripped of illusions, you start to see everything sharper, cleaner, without the haze of hope that people will change. That was the beginning of my rise. The first thing I did was find a financial advisor, someone with no connection to my family, no reason to play sides. His name was Martin, mid-40s, sharp-eyed but calm, the kind of man who could explain complicated financial structures without making you feel stupid. When I told him about the situation with my family, he didn't laugh or brush it off. He leaned back, steepled his fingers, and said, "You're not the first client I've had with this problem. Money doesn't change who people are. It just unmasks them. Let's make sure they never touch a cent without your say-so." Over the following weeks, Martin became my quiet ally. He helped me set up protective layers, trusts, accounts in my company's name, legal frameworks that placed distance between me and the funds. It wasn't about paranoia. It was about creating a wall no entitled relative could climb, no matter how many family meetings they called. For the first time in months, I slept soundly, knowing that if my parents or siblings tried anything, they'd hit brick walls reinforced with iron. But my rise wasn't just financial, it was personal. I started working out, something I'd neglected for years while chained to my laptop. I joined a gym, not to prove anything to anyone, but to reclaim my own body after years of exhaustion. Slowly, I felt my strength return, my posture straighten, my mind clear. The fog of guilt they'd instilled in me for years began to lift. And as my confidence grew, so did my business. That first $2.7 million deal had opened doors I never imagined. Suddenly, people who once ignored my emails were now reaching out, eager to collaborate. I signed 2 more contracts in quick succession, smaller than the first, but still substantial, each one reinforcing that this wasn't a fluke. It was real, sustainable success. My little internet lemonade stand, as my cousins had once mocked, had become a company people respected. It felt almost surreal, balancing this private victory with the chaos of my family's escalating demands. Every time my phone buzzed with another manipulative message, I'd glance at it, shake my head, and return to a call with investors who actually valued what I had built. Their laughter from last Christmas echoed faintly in my memory, but it was drowned out by the sound of contracts being signed, deals closing, opportunities stacking up one after another. What I didn't expect, though, was how empowering silence could be. I stopped explaining myself to them. I stopped defending my choices. Whenever my dad left another voicemail saying, "You need to stop being stubborn. This is bigger than you," I didn't respond. When Jason texted, "If you don't let us in soon, we'll have to intervene," I ignored him. And when Claire left a long, emotional message about how I was tearing the family apart, I simply archived it. No more feeding the fire. No more giving them space to twist my words. Instead, I poured myself into my work, my health, and, slowly, into building connections outside of them. I reconnected with an old friend from college, someone who had always believed in me. I began attending networking events, even though social gatherings had always drained me. To my surprise, I found people who understood the grind, who respected the hustle, who didn't see me as a walking bank. It was like stepping out of a cage I hadn't realized I'd been living in my whole life. Every success, every ounce of progress felt like proof that I wasn't the failure my family had painted me to be. And the more I grew, the less power their voices had over me. But here's the thing about gaining strength. Once you have it, once you start standing taller, the people who used to keep you down don't just fade quietly into the background. They push harder. They lash out. They get desperate. And that's exactly what my family did. As my business climbed, as I became stronger, they crossed another line. One that made it clear this wasn't just petty entitlement anymore. It was war. The shift from defense to offense didn't happen overnight. It was more like a quiet hum beneath everything I was doing, an awareness that eventually they would force my hand. And sure enough, they did. Because once my family realized I wasn't going to cave, they decided to escalate in ways that almost felt surreal, as if they had forgotten I wasn't the same helpless kid they used to steamroll. The first crack came when I got a call from Martin, my advisor. "Nathan," he said carefully, "I don't want to alarm you, but your parents tried to contact one of the banks holding your business accounts. They claimed they were acting on your behalf." I remember sitting frozen, gripping the phone so tightly my knuckles turned white. "On my behalf? How?" "They said they had your permission. Even sent over a letter with a shaky-looking signature." Martin paused, letting the weight of it sink in. "Of course, we flagged it immediately. But you need to understand, this isn't them asking anymore. This is them trying to forge your hand." I felt something cold and steady lock into place inside me. A quiet fury. They had tried to use my own name against me. That night, I started digging. I hired a private lawyer, a no-nonsense woman named Dana who specialized in asset protection and family disputes. She listened as I told her everything, from the mocking laughter last Christmas to the bank's fraud alerts, to the forged letter. By the time I finished, she shook her head slowly. "This isn't just entitlement. This borders on attempted financial abuse. If they keep this up, they could face legal consequences." Legal consequences. I sat with those words, turning them over like a coin in my hand. For the first time, I realized I wasn't powerless. I wasn't just reacting. I had tools, and I had allies who weren't tied to them. Over the next few weeks, I worked quietly with Dana and Martin, layering my defenses. We drafted legal documents that made my independence crystal clear. We set up monitoring systems so I'd be alerted immediately if anyone so much as whispered my name to a bank. And, most importantly, I began documenting everything. Every voicemail, every manipulative text, every attempted breach. At first, it felt petty to keep such meticulous records. But Dana assured me, paper trails are power. If they ever try to claim you're unstable or unfit, this will prove otherwise. And then, in the middle of this preparation, I stumbled across something I hadn't expected, something that shifted the balance entirely. Jason had gotten careless. He posted a photo on social media of himself and some friends at a bar, drinks raised, big smiles. Normally, I wouldn't have cared. But what caught my eye was the caption, "When your bro finally cashes out, everybody eats soon." Everybody eats soon. It wasn't just bragging, it was a confession. Proof that he had been telling people my money was theirs for the taking. I scrolled through the comments, my chest tightening. Friends of his wrote things like, "Can't wait for that payout," and "Man, your brother better hook you up big time." He had clearly been running his mouth, painting me as a guaranteed source of wealth. That was the piece I needed. It wasn't just entitlement anymore, it was exposure. If he'd been telling strangers that he expected a cut, how long before one of them came knocking? I saved every screenshot, every comment, every timestamp. Then I started paying closer attention. A week later, Claire slipped up too. She sent me a text meant for someone else. "Don't worry, once Nathan finally caves, I'll cover you. He owes us anyway." She tried to delete it immediately, followed by a flustered, "Oops, wrong chat, lol, ignore that." But I didn't ignore it. I saved it. Because by then, I had learned something crucial. The more rope I gave them, the more they'd wrap it around their own necks. And while all of this was happening, life on my end was only getting better. My company landed another deal, smaller, but with a big-name client that gave me credibility I couldn't have bought with a check. I was invited to speak on a panel about entrepreneurship. For the first time in my life, people who weren't related to me were looking at me with respect, not condescension. That contrast, the respect outside versus the greed at home, made my resolve ironclad. Because now I wasn't just a guy with money. I was a man with influence, with allies, with documented evidence, and with legal protection. My family thought they were circling prey, but in reality, they were digging themselves deeper into a trap I hadn't even needed to set. And as Christmas approached again, almost exactly 1 year after that night they had laughed me out of the room, I knew the stage was being set. They thought they were closing in, ready to finally take what they believed was theirs. But I was already in position, stronger than I'd ever been, waiting for the perfect moment to show them just how badly they had underestimated me. I knew their arrogance would be their undoing, and all I had to do was wait. Every manipulative text, every voicemail, every smug assumption that I was still the kid they could push around, it was all fuel. By the time December rolled back around, a full year since that humiliating Christmas dinner, I wasn't just ready to defend myself. I was ready to deliver the kind of response they would never forget. The invitation came, of course, from my mom. She called 2 weeks before Christmas, her voice sugar-coated with the false warmth only she could pull off. "Nathan, we're having everyone over again this year. It'll be nice to celebrate together, as a family. After all, this year is special, isn't it?" She let that last line hang in the air, thick with implication. I knew exactly what she meant. To her, my success wasn't just mine, it was their triumph, their prize. And Christmas dinner was going to be the stage where they expected me to hand it over. I accepted the invitation. Calmly, quietly, and in the days leading up to it, I finalized my preparation. Dana had helped me draft letters clarifying that no one in my family had any legal authority over me or my company. Martin had ensured every cent was secured beyond their reach. And I had my growing stack of evidence, screenshots, texts, voicemails, neatly organized in a folder. But I wasn't planning on yelling or accusing or even raising my voice. Revenge, I had realized, didn't need to be loud. It needed to be undeniable. When the night came, I walked into my parents' house with a steady smile. The dining room was lit exactly as it had been the year before. Candles flickering, silverware gleaming, everyone gathered around the long wooden table. Only this time, instead of jokes about my internet lemonade stand, the room buzzed with forced congratulations and thinly veiled anticipation. Jason slapped me on the back as I walked in. "There he is, the millionaire. Don't forget your favorite brother when the gifts start flying." He winked at his wife, who laughed a little too hard. Claire leaned in to kiss my cheek. "So proud of you, Nathan. Really. You know, law school was such a burden on me, but I'm sure you'll help lighten that load." And my dad, glass of wine in hand, raised it toward me. "To Nathan," he said, his voice booming, finally proving he's part of this family's legacy. The applause around the table was polite, but hungry, predatory. They weren't toasting me. They were toasting what they thought they were about to receive. Dinner went on as usual, though I barely touched my food. I let them circle me with their words, dropping hints, planting seeds. "Maybe you'll buy a bigger house nearby. Maybe you'll invest in Jason's firm. Maybe you'll pay off Claire's loans. Maybe you'll fund a family trip to Europe." The word "maybe" became the most transparent mask for when. Finally, as dessert was being cleared, my mom placed her hand on mine. "Nathan," she said sweetly, "why don't you share with everyone what your plans are? You've been so quiet." The room hushed. Every pair of eyes turned to me. This was it. The moment they expected me to announce how I'd be distributing their imagined shares of my hard work. I took a breath, steady and calm. "You're right," I said. "I've been quiet for too long. And I think tonight is the perfect time to clear things up." I pulled a small folder from my bag and laid it gently on the table. This past year, I've had a lot of success. And with that success has come a lot of pressure. From people who think they deserve a piece of it. I let my gaze sweep the table, watching the smirks fade into tight smiles. "So, I want to be clear tonight, once and for all." I opened the folder. On top were printed copies of texts and screenshots. Jason's bar photo, his bragging caption. Claire's mistaken text promising money to someone else. My parents' group message admitting they had tried to access my account. I slid them across the table, one by one. Like cards in a game, I was always destined to win. The silence was deafening. My mom's face went pale. Jason's jaw tightened. Claire opened her mouth, closed it, then opened it again with nothing to say. "These," I said quietly, "are just a fraction of what I've documented. Every call, every voicemail, every attempt to breach my accounts. All neatly saved. All easily handed to the right people if I choose." I leaned back, letting the weight of my words settle. "So let's be perfectly clear. None of you have any claim to my money. Not 1 cent. Not now. Not ever. This is mine, built without your support, without your belief, and in spite of your mockery. And if any of you attempt to interfere again, the next people you'll hear from won't be me. It'll be my lawyer." For a long moment, no one moved. The power shift was palpable, a seismic crack in the foundation of control they thought they held. Finally, Jason scoffed, trying to recover his bravado. "You're bluffing. You wouldn't drag your own family through the mud." I met his eyes, steady as stone. "Try me." And then I stood, leaving the folder in the center of the table, the evidence like a ticking time bomb they couldn't defuse. I walked out of that dining room with my head high, their stunned silence following me like an echo. For the first time in my life, I wasn't the one shrinking under their laughter. They were shrinking under mine. But that was only the beginning. Because what happened after that night, the fallout, the desperation, the way they scrambled once they realized I was serious, that was where the real story began. The fallout wasn't immediate, but it was swift. That Christmas dinner marked the last time I would ever walk into my parents' house as the version of myself they thought they could control. When I left that folder on the table, I didn't just walk away from dessert. I walked away from years of their dominance, their smug superiority, their belief that I was nothing without them. And I think deep down, they knew it too. The first wave came the next morning. My phone lit up with messages from Jason, rapid fire and panicked. At first, he tried anger. You're really going to destroy the family over money? You're pathetic. Then he tried guilt. Bro, I was just joking in that post. You know I'd never really take from you. By the afternoon, desperation had seeped in. Okay, maybe I messed up, but don't go to a lawyer. Please. I could lose my job if this comes out. I didn't respond. Claire was subtler, but not by much. She called 3 times, leaving long voicemails about how she had only ever wanted the best for me, how her text had been misinterpreted, how I should remember the bond between siblings. At one point, she even choked up and said, I don't know who filled your head with this paranoia, but we're family. Don't ruin everything over misunderstandings. But the one that broke the silence in me wasn't my siblings, it was my mom. She sent an email, formal and cold, practically dripping with entitlement. Nathan, your behavior at Christmas was deeply disappointing. You embarrassed this family in front of everyone. The least you can do is make amends by contributing to the household that raised you. We expect a proper discussion soon, before this gets any more out of hand. That was the moment I realized they weren't going to stop. Not out of love, not out of guilt, not even out of fear. They would keep pushing, keep clawing, until I drew a line they couldn't cross. So I did. With Dana's help, I filed formal notices, restraining my family from contacting my financial institutions, documenting their attempts at forgery, and making it clear that any further harassment would lead to legal action. I didn't have to drag them into court. The threat alone was enough. Banks flagged their names. Advisors were notified. It was as if invisible doors slammed shut all around them. The calls dwindled after that. The voicemails turned bitter, then quiet. Jason stopped posting his smug captions. Claire withdrew into silence. And my parents, for all their bluster, seemed to retreat the most. They stopped inviting me to dinners, stopped sending the half-hearted, family comes first messages. It was as though, once they realized they couldn't control me, or my money, they no longer saw the point of pretending I belonged. And you know what? That was fine with me. Because while they scrambled, I thrived. My business kept growing, my circle expanded, and for the first time in my life, I felt free of their chains. I wasn't the failure at the dinner table anymore. I wasn't the afterthought. I was a man who had built something on his own, and who had finally learned the hardest truth of all. Family isn't defined by blood. It's defined by respect. A year later, when Christmas rolled around again, I didn't go back to that dining room. Instead, I spent it with friends, people who had stood by me without demanding a share of my success. We laughed, ate, and toasted to a year of growth. And as the night drew to a close, I thought back to that moment when my mom had laughed at me, saying I'd never make real money. I smiled to myself, not with bitterness, but with clarity. Because the truth was simple, they hadn't just underestimated me. They had erased themselves from my future. And as I raised my glass, I said quietly, almost to myself, to doing this for me. For once, the words weren't a promise. They were a victory. The final line? They thought my success would make me theirs, but in the end, it freed me from them forever. Hey, this is my first time posting, and I'm not sure if I'll even get any replies, but I need to get this off my chest. This all happened a few years ago, but I still can't shake the feeling of betrayal. Maybe you all can help me understand if I was in the wrong, but I honestly think I'm owed a little justice for what went down. So, here's the setup. My name is Jess, and I come from a pretty normal family. Mom, Dad, and my younger brother, Alex. Like most families, we had our share of squabbles over the years, but nothing too serious. That is, until the whole issue with our late grandfather's house came up. Grandpa passed away when I was in my early 20s, and he left behind this small, but charming house. It wasn't anything special, certainly not a mansion, but it was cozy, had a good amount of space, and it felt like it could be home. The only problem was, no one was living there. Grandpa had been living alone in the house for years, and now that he was gone, it just sat there, empty and waiting for someone to take it. I didn't think much about it at first. It was just a house, right? But then, out of nowhere, Alex, my younger brother, announced he was moving into Grandpa's place. No biggie, I thought. He could use the space, and I wasn't exactly in a position to need it at the time. At that point, I was living with some friends, just trying to get by after a rough breakup. But as time passed, I realized I could really use a place of my own, somewhere quiet to regroup, get a little peace and space. So, I did what anyone would do. I asked my parents if I could stay at Grandpa's house for a while. I wasn't asking for a permanent spot, just a temporary place while I got my life back on track. I was already feeling a little awkward about it, because Alex had just moved in. But it's not like I was asking for his room. I'd be fine with the extra room or even the guest bedroom. I figured it wouldn't hurt to ask, right? I'll never forget the moment I brought it up to my parents. It was a Sunday afternoon, and we were all sitting in the living room. I was feeling a bit nervous because I knew Alex was already settled in there, but I figured my parents would see it as a reasonable request. "Hey, Mom, Dad," I started, my voice a little tentative. "I've been thinking, do you think I could stay at Grandpa's house for a little while? I could really use a place to crash until I get back on my feet. I'll help with anything, like taking care of the place or doing the lawn work." There was a pause. My mom looked at me for a second, but instead of the usual warmth in her expression, there was this almost flatness. It was hard to put my finger on it first, but something was off. My dad was sitting there too, half paying attention, his eyes glued to his phone as always. He didn't even look up when I spoke. Mom sighed, then looked at Dad, like she was waiting for him to say something. When he didn't, she finally spoke. "No, Jess, that's not going to work." I froze for a second. "What do you mean?" I asked, trying to keep my voice steady. "It's Alex's place now," she said, almost dismissively. "He's the one who's staying there. You need to figure something else out." I could feel my chest tighten. It was one thing to hear that from my brother, but coming from my mom? And Dad just sat there, staring at his phone, acting like I wasn't even talking. I didn't know what to say. My mouth went dry, and I tried to keep my cool. "I don't need to stay forever, just for a little while. I'd be really careful, I promise. It's just temporary while I get back on track." My mom's face didn't soften. She crossed her arms, leaning back in her chair. "No, Jess, it's not happening." "But why? What's the big deal?" I pressed, genuinely confused. This was family, right? I thought we were supposed to help each other out. My dad finally looked up from his phone. "It's Alex's house now. You should be more independent." I blinked, feeling the sting of his words. It wasn't like I wasn't trying to be independent. I just needed a little help, a little space to breathe. But no, this was apparently where the line was drawn. "But you let Alex stay there. Why not me?" I asked, my voice a little sharper than I meant. My mom's gaze hardened, like I'd said something I shouldn't have. "Alex needs it, Jess. He's been struggling with things, and we've already told you, you need to handle your own stuff. Don't ask for special treatment." The words felt like a slap in the face. "Alex is struggling?" I repeated, my voice shaky now. "What about me? I've been struggling too. But apparently, I don't matter enough for a little help." The room went silent for a few moments, and I could feel the tension in the air. My parents didn't seem to care about the situation. They just sat there, as if I was being unreasonable. And Alex? Well, of course, when I mentioned it to him later, he laughed. "You really think I'm going to let you move in here?" he asked, snickering. "No way, Jess. It's my place now. Figure it out." So, after that, I tried to put it out of my mind. It wasn't easy, but I had no choice. I couldn't just sit around begging for a place to stay. I had to make things work, so I moved into a tiny studio apartment that I could barely afford. It was cramped, but it was mine, and I didn't have to rely on anyone. But as much as I hated the situation, the bitterness stayed with me. Every time I saw my parents or Alex, I couldn't shake the feeling that they had abandoned me. I was the one who needed a hand up, not Alex, who had been living rent-free in a house he didn't even care about, acting like it was his personal palace. But they all kept defending him. "He's in a rough spot," my mom would say whenever I brought it up. "You'll figure it out, Jess." And Alex? Well, he wasn't shy about rubbing it in. He'd send me texts every now and then, bragging about how his life was so much easier with the house. He'd even throw in a comment here or there about how nice it was not to have to pay rent. It was like he knew how much it bothered me, and he loved it. He was playing some twisted game, and I was the punchline. Things dragged on like that for months. I got a second job, started hustling to cover rent, and tried to keep my head down. But it was hard not to feel like my parents had picked a side. I'd overhear them talking about Alex's bright future and how he was really getting his act together. Meanwhile, they'd give me these forced pep talks, telling me that I just needed to work harder. I guess they thought I'd get over it, but I didn't. I was tired of being the one they only remembered when they needed something. One evening, about a year after the whole "no, you can't stay at Grandpa's house" incident, I was out grabbing dinner when I got a call from my mom. I didn't even want to pick it up, but I did. "Jess, honey, we need to talk," she said, her voice oddly serious. I felt a little jolt of anxiety. My parents had never called me this late unless something was up. "What's going on?" I asked, trying to sound calm. "Well, we've been talking, and we have a situation," she said slowly, dragging out every word. "We're in a bit of a financial bind, and we could really use your help. It's important." I sat up straighter. This sounded off. They'd never asked me for help before. Not like this. "Okay, what kind of help are we talking about?" I asked, already dreading the answer. "Your dad and I need to borrow some money," she said, not even bothering to sugarcoat it. "We've had some unexpected expenses come up, and we were hoping you could loan us a couple thousand, just until we can get things sorted." I couldn't believe what I was hearing. My mouth went dry. Here I was, struggling to make rent, still getting by on a shoestring budget, and they wanted me to give them money? The same people who had turned me away when I needed them? I was quiet for a moment, not sure what to say. "You want me to give you money?" I repeated, feeling the heat rise in my chest. "After everything? After you told me to figure it out when I needed help? Now you want to borrow from me?" There was an awkward silence on the other end of the line before my mom spoke again. "Look, Jess, we're not asking for much, and we're family. We've helped you before, and now it's your turn to help us." The audacity. She really thought I'd just roll over and help them after everything that happened? I could feel my heart pounding in my ears. I wanted to tell her no. I wanted to hang up the phone and let them deal with their own mess, just like they had told me to do when I was struggling. But there was something inside me that snapped. Maybe it was the anger, or maybe it was just the sheer injustice of the situation. "Actually," I said, my voice calm but sharp, "I think I've helped enough already." "What are you talking about?" she asked, confused. "I've been helping myself for the past year," I said, feeling a little more confident now. "You made it clear that I wasn't worth helping. You told me to figure it out, so that's what I did. I didn't get a place to crash. I didn't get a handout. And now you want me to bail you out." My mom's tone shifted from pleading to defensive. "Jess, this is different. We're family. You should understand that." "I do understand," I said, a bit of a bitter chuckle slipping out. "I understand that when it was my turn, I was supposed to figure it out on my own. And now that it's your turn, you're coming to me. Well, I'm going to do the same thing you did. Figure it out." I could hear her sputtering, but I wasn't done yet. "And as for the money, I think I'll be keeping it for myself, just in case I ever need to figure something out again." The silence on the other end was almost deafening. I could almost picture her speechless, not knowing what to say to that. And then, just before I hung up, I added one final line. "Maybe you should have helped me when you had the chance." The silence lingered for what felt like an eternity before my mom finally spoke again, but this time, her voice had lost the pleading tone. It was colder, sharper. "Well, fine. If you don't want to help, then we'll just have to figure it out ourselves." I heard the sound of her taking a breath, probably trying to compose herself. "But don't think this is the last time we're going to ask. You're still family, Jess." I wasn't sure if I was supposed to feel guilty, but honestly, all I felt was a quiet sense of relief. I had finally stood up for myself. "Yeah, well, good luck," I said before I ended the call, my hand shaking slightly as I put the phone down. That night, I didn't sleep much. It wasn't because I felt bad. I didn't. It was because I felt powerful. I had said no. I had taken control of the situation. For once, I wasn't the one on the receiving end of their expectations. For once, I made the rules. The next few days were tense, though. My mom and dad didn't call or text me, which felt weird. I was used to their constant check-ins or their passive-aggressive guilt trips. But now, nothing. It was like I had vanished from their radar, and it was exactly what I needed. I didn't want to deal with their drama anymore. Alex, on the other hand, wasn't as silent. He texted me the day after that conversation. "Mom and Dad said you're being stubborn," he wrote. "I don't get it. Why can't you just help them out like they helped you?" I stared at the text for a while before responding, my fingers hovering over the keyboard. Help them out? Like how? By letting them control me again? I don't think so. He replied almost immediately. Wow, Jess. I'm just saying. They've been there for you. You should be there for them now. I wanted to scream, to tell him exactly what I thought of him and his precious little house, but I held back. Instead, I just typed out something simple. Maybe if they'd been there for me when I needed it, I'd be more inclined to help. There was a pause before he answered again. You're being childish. And that was it. It didn't matter what he said, because I knew one thing. I wasn't going to fall for their manipulation anymore. It had taken me a while to realize it, but I was done. I was done being the one to bend over backward while they walked all over me. But the real twist? The real reason they were going to regret this? They weren't done with me yet. Oh, no. They still needed something. Something big. And when they came crawling back, I would be ready. A couple of weeks went by, and I settled into my routine. Work, gym, Netflix, sleep. It wasn't glamorous, but I felt more at peace than I had in months. The guilt they tried to make me feel had slowly faded away, replaced with a quiet satisfaction. I had taken control. I had done what was right for me. But just when I thought I was safe from their drama, the storm hit. One afternoon, as I was finishing up a shift at the cafe, I saw a notification pop up on my phone. It was a message from my dad. I hadn't heard from him directly in ages. It read, "We need to talk. Urgently." I felt a knot in my stomach, the familiar anxiety creeping back in. I stared at the message, trying to figure out what was going on. It had been so quiet for so long, I was beginning to think they'd just given up on me. I was about to reply when another message came through, this one from Alex. "It's about Grandpa's house," he wrote. "Dad's asking for your help." I stared at the message for a long time. Help with Grandpa's house? What the hell did that even mean? I could already feel my blood pressure rising. They couldn't possibly be serious. I decided to call my dad. It rang a few times before he picked up. "Jess," he said, his voice strained. "We need to talk about something important." "Dad, what's going on?" I asked, keeping my voice steady, though I could feel my heart thudding in my chest. "Look, it's a long story, but we need you to come by the house. There's something you need to know. Something urgent about the property." I felt a sudden chill. "What do you mean, urgent?" "We can't explain it all over the phone. You need to come in person." "Why now? Why are you asking me for help again, after everything?" I asked, my frustration creeping in. "Please, Jess," he said, the desperation clear in his voice. "Just come over. This is really important." I wanted to say no. I wanted to hang up the phone and tell them to figure it out themselves. But then I remembered the satisfaction of standing my ground before. Maybe, just maybe, this was the final test. And I was going to pass it with flying colors. I didn't reply right away. Instead, I just texted back, "I'll be there in an hour." I pulled up to my parents' house, gripping the steering wheel tighter than I needed to. I knew something was off. The whole urgent thing didn't sit right with me. If it were really that important, they would have told me over the phone. But I was curious to see just how far they would go to manipulate me this time. As I stepped out of my car, I took a deep breath, bracing myself for whatever nonsense they were about to throw at me. I rang the doorbell, and after a few moments, my mom opened the door with a wide, overly enthusiastic smile. "Oh, Jess, you actually came," she said, as if we hadn't just spent the last few months at odds. I narrowed my eyes. "Yeah, you said it was urgent." She waved her hand dismissively. Come in. We'll explain inside." I hesitated before stepping into the house. It smelled the same as always, vanilla candles and my dad's old cologne lingering in the air. It should have felt comforting, but instead, it made me uneasy, like I was stepping into a trap. I followed my mom into the living room, where my dad and Alex were already waiting. My dad was seated in his old recliner, arms crossed, looking annoyed. Alex sat on the couch, scrolling through his phone like he couldn't care less that I was there. I took a seat across from them. "All right," I said, cutting straight to the point. "What's so urgent?" My dad cleared his throat. "Well, first, we just wanted to see you, sweetheart. It's been too long." I let out a dry laugh. "Right. Because you were so desperate to see me that you couldn't just say that on the phone." My mom shot my dad a look, and he sighed. "Fine. We wanted to talk to you about Grandpa's house." I leaned back in my chair, arms crossed. "What about it?" My mom gave me that saccharine smile she always used when she was about to ask for something unreasonable. "Well, we've been talking, and we realized that, maybe, we were a little unfair to you before." I blinked. "A little." She ignored my sarcasm and continued. The thing is, Alex has been having a tough time keeping up with things at the house. There are property taxes, maintenance, and, well, he's just got so much on his plate. We thought that maybe you could step in and help. I stared at her, waiting for the punchline. Help? Yes, my dad chimed in. We were thinking you could start pitching in financially, just to make sure everything is taken care of. I felt my jaw tighten. Let me get this straight. You told me I couldn't live there when I needed a place to stay, but now you want me to pay for it? For Alex's house. My brother finally looked up from his phone, rolling his eyes. It's not just for me, Jess. It's for the family. I let out a bitter laugh. Oh, now it's a family thing? That's funny, because when I needed help, I was told to figure it out. My mom sighed dramatically, like I was being the unreasonable one. Jess, don't be like this. We made decisions that we thought were best at the time. But now, we really do need your help. I shook my head, feeling my temper rise. No, you don't need my help. You need a scapegoat. You need someone to clean up the mess you made when you handed Grandpa's house to Alex without thinking it through. My dad leaned forward, his expression hardening. Don't talk like that. This is about doing what's right for the family. I stood up, my heart pounding. You mean doing what's right for Alex? Because let's be real, that's all this has ever been about. Alex scoffed. Oh, come on, Jess. Stop playing the victim. You act like we threw you out on the street. I turned to him, my voice cold. You did. Maybe not literally, but you sure as hell didn't care when I was struggling. You told me to figure it out. So guess what? Now it's your turn. My mom gasped. Jess, that is not how family treats each other. I laughed. Actually laughed. That's rich coming from you. Because when I needed my family, where were you? Oh, right. Too busy handing out free houses to my golden child brother. My dad's face was turning red. That's enough. I grabbed my bag. No, it's not. Because I'm done. I'm done playing this game where you guilt-trip me into being your backup plan. You made your choice when you told me I wasn't welcome. Well, now I'm making mine. My mom looked genuinely panicked now. Jess, wait. I shook my head. No, you don't get to control me anymore. You don't get to cherry pick when I'm part of the family. I turned to Alex. You wanted the house? You got it. Good luck figuring it out. I turned on my heel and walked to the door, my heart pounding in my chest. Jess, don't do this. My dad called after me. We need you. I stopped at the doorway, turning back just enough to meet his eyes. Yeah, I said. And I needed you. Funny how that works. And with that, I walked out. I drove away without looking back, but the second I was alone in my car, I felt a wave of emotions crash over me, anger, frustration, maybe even a little sadness. Not because I regretted what I said, but because it confirmed something I had always suspected. I was never really part of their plans unless they needed something from me. After that, I went full no contact. Blocked their numbers, ignored their emails, and made it clear through mutual relatives that I was done. And you know what? It was the best decision I ever made. No more last-minute guilt trips. No more feeling like I was some disposable backup plan. From what I've heard, Alex is still struggling with the house. Turns out, property taxes and upkeep aren't as easy as having everything handed to you on a silver platter. My parents apparently tried to spin the story to make me look like the villain, but people caught on fast. Some of my extended family actually reached out to tell me they understood why I walked away. Honestly, I have no regrets. They made their choice, and I made mine. So, what do you think? Was I too harsh? Or did they finally just get a taste of their own medicine? My name's Caleb. I'm 23 now, but this all happened just over a year ago on the day I graduated from college. I was the first in my family to finish a 4-year university program. You'd think that would be a big deal. You'd think a family might be proud. But let's just say, in my house, things like pride came with conditions, and I didn't meet them. I come from a very loud, very image-conscious family. My parents, especially my mom, care more about what things look like than what they actually are. My younger sister, Mia, has always been the golden child. She could sneeze into a microphone and they'd call it a TED Talk. She graduated high school 2 years before I did, and the celebration they threw for her still gets talked about in family group chats like it was a royal coronation. They rented a tent big enough for a wedding, set off backyard fireworks, even though our HOA sent them a warning, and had this massive catered buffet with little gold cards labeling everything like mini Capri skewers and imported prosciutto with fig jam. Mia even made a dramatic entrance in a white dress like she was accepting an Oscar. I'm not exaggerating. That's just how it was. And me? I'd always been the quiet one, the fixer, the one who noticed when the oil light came on in my mom's car, the one who cleaned up after parties I wasn't even invited to. I worked full-time while studying, took night classes, skipped out on trips and birthdays just to finish my final thesis. My graduation wasn't just a piece of paper, it was the first thing I'd ever done entirely for myself, which made what happened sting that much more. I'd given them 2 months' notice about the date. I sent a formal e-invite and even followed up with texts. My dad read it and responded with a thumbs-up emoji. My mom hearted the message. Mia never replied. Not that I expected her to. She was too busy posting filtered selfies from whatever beach her new boyfriend had dragged her to that week. Still, I held on to hope. Maybe they were planning something quiet, something thoughtful, something that said, "We see you, Caleb." The morning of my graduation, I woke up early and ironed my shirt twice. I took the time to style my hair properly, something I rarely bothered with. I stared at myself in the mirror, thinking, this is it. This is the day they finally get it. They didn't. When I got to the ceremony, I didn't see them. My name was called. I walked the stage, smiled into the crowd, and nothing. Not a single familiar face. I figured maybe they'd show up late. Maybe they were running behind. When I got home, I saw a sad little attempt at a party waiting for me in the backyard, if you could even call it that. A wrinkled congrats banner that looked like it had been rescued from a junk drawer. One large cold pizza in a greasy box. 2 2-liter bottles of off-brand soda. No music. No neighbors. No friends. Just my mom on her phone, my dad watching TV through the patio door, and Mia half asleep in a lawn chair. I stood there, stunned. My mom looked up and said with this forced smile, "See? We did something. Be grateful we even did that much." She gestured to the pizza like it was a gourmet spread. I didn't say anything. My uncle, who must have stopped by on his way to actually do something fun, muttered, "Not everything has to be about you, Caleb." That's when something inside me cracked, not with rage, but this hollow, sinking kind of disappointment. Like realizing the prize you've been chasing your whole life was just a cardboard cutout. I didn't yell. I didn't cry. I just turned around, went into the house, grabbed my diploma off the counter where they dumped it like junk mail, and walked upstairs to my room. I stared at that piece of paper for a long time, not because I was proud, but because it confirmed something I'd been trying not to accept. They were never going to change. I opened my laptop and started looking at flights. Anywhere. Just not here. Somewhere far enough away that I wouldn't bump into any of them at a grocery store. Somewhere quiet. Peaceful. I found a one-way ticket to a city I'd never been to and clicked Book Now without hesitation. That night, I packed a single bag. I didn't tell anyone. I didn't leave a note. I left before sunrise. I landed in Seattle just after noon the next day. It wasn't exactly the kind of place you'd go for sunshine and celebration, but it felt clean, fresh. Like a blank page I could finally write on without anyone else's scribbles smudging the margins. I booked a cheap Airbnb for a week, just enough time to get my head on straight. My plan wasn't entirely figured out, but one thing was clear: I wasn't going back. That first night, as I sat by the window watching the rain streak down the glass, I felt something unfamiliar. Silence. Not the uncomfortable kind, but a peaceful one. No one calling me to fix a broken sink. No one asking for rides, money, or help. No passive-aggressive sighs. No guilt. Just me. It was terrifying. And freeing. Back home, I'd always been the reliable one. The helper. The one they assumed would always be around because I never complained. And honestly, that's on me. I made it easy for them. I kept saying yes when I should have said no. I showed up when no one else did. And they took that as a given. Like I was furniture. Like I was part of the house, not someone who needed space or appreciation. But this time, I wasn't going to quietly fade into the background. Over the next few weeks, I got to work. First, I changed my number. Then I locked down my email accounts, rerouted important mail, and pulled the plug on every shared service I was paying for. And there were a lot. See, while they were out throwing fireworks and calling each other family goals on social media, I'd been the one quietly footing the bills. My parents' phone plan? Under my name. Netflix, Hulu, Amazon? All me. That family Spotify account? Guess who set that up? I'd co-signed on Mia's student loans, helped pay for my dad's car insurance after he got into that fender bender, and even floated my mom a few grand for dental work that mysteriously turned into a spa weekend in Palm Springs. They never said thank you. Not once. And I never demanded it. Until now. I logged into every account and wiped them clean. canceled payments, changed passwords. Even the group family calendar I'd maintained, filled with birthdays, reminders, and appointments, I deleted it entirely. I didn't make a scene. I didn't send a dramatic goodbye. I just removed myself from every part of their lives that relied on me functioning in the background. It took 3 days for the messages to start. First came the confusion. Mia texted, "Hey, did the Wi-Fi go down at the house? I can't log into Netflix." Mom texted, "Did you change the phone plan? I can't make any calls." Dad texted, "Your uncle said the insurance company is trying to reach me. What's going on?" I ignored them all. Then came the panic. Mom texted, "Caleb, what is happening? Why are you doing this?" Mia texted, "You're being so dramatic right now. Just fix whatever you did. I have a date night." Dad texted, "This isn't funny, son. Grow up and take responsibility. Take responsibility." That one hit me hard. I've been taking responsibility for everything for years, quietly, thanklessly. But now that I was taking responsibility for myself, it was suddenly a crime? What really made my blood go cold was what came next. A group message. A new one, since I left the old one. Mom texted, "We need to talk. What you're doing is hurting the family." Mia texted, "You're making things harder for everyone. Just come back and we'll pretend this didn't happen." Uncle Jim texted, "Real mature, Caleb. So this is how you repay us for raising you." Repay them? As if I owed them for dragging me to my own graduation party like it was a chore. As if I was supposed to smile and thank them for a cold pizza and a sarcastic lecture on humility. As if their bare minimum effort was a gift I should be grateful for. I didn't respond. But I did something better. I posted a single photo. It was of my diploma, next to a packed suitcase and a plane ticket stub. No caption. Just silence. They lost it. Mom texted, "Where are you?" Mia texted, "Did you seriously leave?" Dad texted, "This is your family, Caleb. Don't throw it away over a misunderstanding." But it wasn't a misunderstanding. It was a culmination. The worst part? Not a single one of them actually apologized. Not for missing my ceremony. Not for the excuse of a party. Not for the years of treating me like a human wallet with no emotions. It's almost funny. When I was around, they never noticed me. But now that I was gone, they couldn't stop looking. And yet, I wasn't done. Because there was one final thing left to pull, one last thread in the fabric they'd wrapped themselves in. Something they'd never see coming, but that would finally make them understand what it means to be taken for granted. A week passed. Then 2. I'd expected the messages to dry up, for the panic to wear off and the silence to settle. But it didn't. If anything, it escalated. Mia posted a cryptic story on Instagram. Just a photo of an empty dining table with the caption, "Family doesn't disappear unless they were never family to begin with." My mom started calling from block numbers. I never picked up. My dad emailed me through his work account, something he hadn't done since I was in high school. "I know you're upset, but punishing the entire family like this isn't right. We can talk. Just come home." It was weird seeing the word home in a sentence like that. Because in all the years I lived under that roof, it never really felt like home to me. It felt like a contract. One I was expected to renew again and again, quietly, without complaint. But I hadn't come this far just to ghost them and be done. I didn't want revenge for revenge's sake. I wanted clarity. I wanted a reckoning. I wanted them to see the damage, not just feel the inconvenience. So I set the final phase in motion. Back before I left, I had been listed as an authorized user on just about everything. Insurance policies, utility bills, loan applications. Because I had the best credit score in the family, they used me as the safety net. The cosigner. The invisible backbone. What they didn't realize was that I still had access. Legal access. And receipts. I dug through old emails and pulled up documents. Car leases, tuition payments. A business loan Uncle Jim had taken out for the new landscaping company that mysteriously never opened. Guess whose name was listed as the backup guarantor? Mine. I gathered every one of those files, screenshots, payment records. I created a folder. Then I did what no one in my family had ever done. I told the truth. I wrote a letter. Not some angry, all-caps rant. A calm, detailed, surgical breakdown of every favor, every dollar, every signed form they'd conveniently forgotten. I printed it out, along with the documents, and mailed it. Yes, physically mailed it, to their house. Certified delivery. I didn't include a return address. I didn't even include a signature. Just a post-it on top that read, You asked why I left. Here's why. The reaction was nuclear. 2 days later, my cousin texted me. Dude, what did you send them? Another message followed. Mia just called me sobbing. Your mom won't come out of her room. I didn't reply, but I wasn't done. You see, all those things I'd signed onto. I could legally remove myself now. The loans had either matured or had new co-signers. The car insurance? I notified the provider I no longer consented to being on the plan. The utility bills? Changed. Disconnected. Reallocated. One by one, I untangled myself. But I knew my mom wouldn't feel it until it touched something that bruised her pride. So I called the private school board where she'd been bragging about her children's accomplishments for years, Mia's alma mater. And I submitted a formal request to have my name removed from all alumni materials, yearbooks, and donation records. She used to boast that her son was featured in their alumni spotlight. Not anymore. The silence that followed was different this time. Not panicked, not angry, just gone. They stopped texting, stopped calling. No more social media jabs. No new guilt trips disguised as jokes. Just radio silence. And strangely, that's when it hit me. Not just the freedom, but the grief. Because for so long, I'd been begging for scraps of affection, twisting myself into something palatable just to be accepted. And now here I was, free, but also mourning something that never really existed. Still, I knew I'd made the right choice. I found a small apartment in the city, nothing fancy, but mine. Got a job at a local nonprofit doing outreach programs, something that made me feel connected, real. For the first time in my life, I woke up not wondering who needed me, but what I wanted to do. Then, a few months later, something strange happened. A handwritten letter arrived. No return address, no name on the envelope. Just my first name, written in tight cursive. Inside was a single sheet of paper. It wasn't long. We didn't realize how much we took from you. Maybe we still don't. But we feel the loss. If you ever want to talk, we'll be here. Mom, I stared at it for a long time. Not because it fixed anything, but because, for once, it didn't demand something from me. It didn't tell me how to feel. It was quiet. I folded the letter and tucked it in the back of my desk drawer. And I haven't responded. Not yet. Because this story wasn't about their apology. It was about my choice. Summer faded into fall, and with it, the old version of me shed like skin I hadn't realized I'd been wearing for years. I didn't rush to replace it. I let the quiet settle. I worked long days, cooked for myself, even joined a weekend chess group, nothing impressive, just a few people who met at the library with thermoses of coffee and stories they weren't afraid to tell. And for the first time, I started telling mine. Not all of it. Not the part about the cold pizza or the diploma that felt more like a receipt than a celebration. But enough. Enough to let it out in pieces, like slowly opening a window in a dusty room. I never expected the healing to come in small things. Like the way the barista at the corner cafe remembered my name and asked how my week was going. Or the first time I came home after work and realized the apartment didn't feel temporary anymore. I even caught myself humming while making dinner one night, a dumb, nostalgic tune my mom used to hum when we baked cookies in December. I stopped mid-note and just stood there, holding the wooden spoon like a relic. The moment hit me hard, not because I missed her, but because I didn't hate her. Not really. I just finally understood the difference between loving someone and letting them break you. But something started gnawing at me. Quietly. It crept in during the still hours, when the city dimmed and I was left alone with my thoughts. I hadn't blocked them. I could have, but I didn't. The truth is, a part of me wanted them to see what life looked like without me. Not out of cruelty. Out of hope. Hope that they'd reflect, that maybe someone in that house would say, we should have done better by him. And one day, I got that. Sort of. It came from Mia, of all people. She sent me a DM. Not a selfie. Not a voice note. Just text. I know I was awful to you. I really didn't see it until you were gone. Mom's been different. Quieter. Dad doesn't say much anymore. The house feels empty. I guess it always was. We just didn't notice because you kept filling the gaps. I miss you. Not what you did. Not the stuff. You. I stared at the message for a while, not knowing what to feel. Part of me rolled my eyes. Another part softened. Because even if it was late, even if it didn't fix anything, she named it. That meant something. I didn't reply right away. I let it sit. Just like I let the letter from my mom sit in that drawer. Because what no one tells you about walking away is this. The distance hurts. Even when it's healthy. Even when you're right. Healing doesn't erase the ache. It just teaches you how to hold it without bleeding. Weeks passed. Then one night, I found myself standing on my apartment balcony, watching the lights of the city blink on one by one. I held my phone in my hand, not out of impulse, but consideration. I typed out a message. Not a long one. Just this. I didn't leave to punish anyone. I left to save myself. I'm still figuring things out. But thank you for finally seeing me. I didn't send it. But I didn't delete it, either. Because something was coming. A moment I hadn't planned for. A choice I'd have to make, not about going back, but about what kind of person I wanted to be now. And it all started with an email I got the next morning. It was from the university. Subject: invitation to speak at winter commencement. I stared at the subject line like it was a mistake. Invitation to speak at winter commencement. At first, I thought it was a mass email, one of those blanket messages sent to every graduate to boost attendance. But when I clicked it open, I saw my name, Caleb Morris, right there in the greeting. They knew who I was. It was from Professor Dean, my old thesis advisor. He wrote that he'd been following my work since graduation. Apparently, the nonprofit I joined had been mentioned in an alumni newsletter, and he'd put two and two together. He said my journey, from student to graduate to someone who chose to walk a different path, was the kind of story students needed to hear. He ended the email with, "If you have the courage to share your truth, I know they'll listen." I read it 3 times. Then a fourth. I don't know what part of it struck me the hardest, that someone had seen me after all this time, or that I was finally being asked to tell my version of the story. For a while, I sat there, frozen, not out of fear, out of disbelief, because somewhere inside me, buried under years of silence and compromise, was a kid who had always wanted someone to say, "You matter. Your story matters." I said yes. The weeks leading up to the speech were strange. A mix of excitement and anxiety. I wrote my draft late at night, usually after work, reading it aloud to the blank walls of my apartment like they were an audience. I didn't want it to be bitter. I didn't want to bash my family, but I didn't want to be honest. I practiced it until I could say the hardest lines without my voice shaking. The day of the ceremony, I wore the same shirt I'd worn to my own graduation. The one I'd ironed twice, hoping someone in the crowd would be proud of me. This time, I didn't care if anyone in the audience knew my name. I was doing it for me. The auditorium was packed. Rows of fresh-faced graduates, their families clutching balloons and flowers, siblings squirming in uncomfortable pews. I stepped up to the podium, took a deep breath, and began. I spoke about my time at the university, the long nights, the double shifts, the quiet moments of doubt. I spoke about what it felt like to walk the stage and look into a crowd that wasn't there for me. And I spoke about what came after, the silence, the grief, and the decision to leave, not because I hated my family, but because I loved myself enough to stop accepting scraps. And then I said this: sometimes, the people who raised you will claim your victories while ignoring your wounds. They'll call it love while handing you silence. And when you finally stop showing up, they'll call you the problem. But leaving isn't weakness. Choosing peace over performance is not abandonment, it's survival. I left because I had to, and it was the hardest, most important thing I've ever done. The room was still. Then someone started clapping. A single pair of hands. Then more. And then it rose, wave after wave, until the entire auditorium was on its feet. I walked off the stage not feeling triumphant, but real. Seen. What I didn't expect was what came next. As I stepped into the hallway backstage, I saw a woman waiting near the exit. She looked smaller than I remembered. Her hair was different, shorter, less styled. She wasn't wearing the usual heavy makeup or bright colors. Just a gray coat and a quiet, nervous expression. My mom. She didn't speak right away. Neither did I. We just stood there in the kind of silence that weighs more than words. Finally, she said, "You look taller up there." I gave a small, dry smile. "That's probably just the stage." She nodded. Then, more quietly, "You were right." I blinked. "About what?" She looked down at her hands. "About all of it. About how we treated you. About what we expected without giving anything back." Her voice cracked. "I didn't know how much you were carrying. I didn't want to know. It was easier not to." I didn't say anything. I just let her talk. "I watched your speech online. Mia sent me the link. I almost didn't come today. I thought maybe you'd hate me if I showed up. But I thought, maybe you'd hate it more if I didn't." I nodded slowly. "You were right." We stood in silence again. This time, it felt different. Not uncomfortable. Just full. "I don't expect forgiveness," she said. I just wanted you to know I'm sorry. For the pizza. For the banner. For all the years before that. I thought love meant showing up when it was convenient. But you showed me what it really looks like. I could feel a lump rising in my throat. I swallowed it back. I'm not ready to come home, I said. She nodded. I know. But I'm okay. A pause. Then, I can see that now. We didn't hug. We didn't cry. It wasn't a Hallmark moment. But it was real. And that was enough. She left without asking me to follow. And I walked outside into the cold winter air, not feeling broken, but whole. That night, I went back to my apartment. I took out the letter she'd sent me months ago, the one I'd hidden in the drawer, and reread it. Then I took out my phone, found her number, and saved it back into my contacts. I didn't call her. Not yet. But this time, I didn't delete it either. Months passed. Mia reached out again. We started texting more often. Just little things. Music, books, photos of weird meals she tried to make. There was no grand apology from her, but there didn't need to be. The effort was there. That was new. One day, I mailed her a copy of my speech with a note scribbled at the bottom. For what it's worth, I'm proud of the person you're trying to be. She sent back a voice memo. Just one word. Thanks. And then, exactly 1 year after the day I walked out of that backyard with my diploma in hand, I booked another flight. One way. This time, not to disappear, but to visit. Not because I owed anyone, but because I chose to. And that made all the difference. I'm Carter. I'm 34, single, and apparently the villain of the family because I don't let people walk all over me, especially not my older brother, Jackson. For context, I live on the coast in a modest 2-bedroom beach house that my grandfather left me when he passed. It's nothing insane, no marble countertops or infinity pool or anything like that, but it has a wraparound porch that catches the sunrise just right, and the salty breeze makes your coffee taste a little better in the morning. It's the only place that's ever really felt like home. I spent summers there as a kid, listening to my grandpa's war stories and learning how to patch a fishing net. When he died, he left it to me in his will, not to my parents, not to Jackson. Me. And that didn't sit well with certain members of the family. Jackson is 5 years older than me and has always carried himself like the main character. He was the golden boy growing up, quarterback, valedictorian, dad's pride and joy. I was the quiet kid who got good grades and didn't cause trouble, which meant I got left alone. I didn't mind, honestly. Jackson always wanted the spotlight. I just wanted peace. He went on to become a financial advisor, drives a leased BMW, and wears those sunglasses that cost more than my rent used to. He's the kind of guy who speaks in LinkedIn buzzwords, like synergy and market leverage. He's also incredibly charming to anyone who doesn't know him well. To his clients, he's a smooth-talking professional. To his friends, he's the life of the party. But to me, he's a narcissist with a superiority complex and a temper that flares up whenever he doesn't get his way. We were never close. Growing up, he used to mock me in front of his friends, call me Little House Carter, because I liked drawing floor plans and reading architecture magazines. He made me believe I was weird for having hobbies that didn't involve chasing a football or hitting on cheerleaders. The older we got, the more distance I put between us. But that didn't stop him from calling when he needed something. The first hint of trouble came a year ago when Jackson got engaged to a woman named Brooke. She was fine, nice enough on the surface, but she gave me those performative, passive-aggressive vibes. The kind of person who'll compliment your shirt and then ask if you found it on sale in a tone that makes you second-guess yourself. She called me Sweet Carter, in this voice that made me feel about 3 feet tall, and always laughed too hard at Jackson's jokes, especially when they were at my expense. The engagement announcement was the first time I noticed the shift. We were all at our parents' house for dinner. Me, Jackson, Brooke, my mom, and Dad, and everyone was fawning over the ring. Jackson stood up, clinking his wine glass with a spoon, and made a big show of how this was the start of their empire. Then, casually, like he was asking to borrow a pen, he turned to me and said, "And of course, we'll be spending our honeymoon at the beach house. Gotta soak up that ocean view while we plot out baby names." I remember blinking a few times, confused. "You mean my beach house?" I said, trying to keep my tone light. Jackson laughed. "Come on, Carter, don't be weird. You're not even using it half the time. It's the family house." "No," I said, a little firmer. "It was Grandpa's, and he left it to me." Jackson's smile didn't falter, but there was a flicker in his eyes, annoyance, maybe. He raised an eyebrow like I was the one being difficult. You're seriously going to be stingy about this? It's not like we're asking to move in. Just a couple weeks. Family supports family, right? My mom chimed in then, always the peacemaker. Carter, honey, don't be so rigid. It's just a gesture. You know your brother's been under a lot of stress. And that right, there was the recurring theme. Jackson could bulldoze a whole crowd and still be seen as under stress, while I was rigid if I didn't roll over. I didn't argue that night. I told them I'd think about it. But the next morning, I sent Jackson a polite text saying I wasn't comfortable lending out the house, especially for weeks, and that I hoped he'd understand. He didn't reply. A week later, my dad called and asked if I was really going to sabotage my brother's big moment over a pile of wood and sand. That's how he referred to the house. A pile of wood and sand. When I reminded him that it was Grandpa's legacy, he sighed and muttered something about me being sentimental and difficult. I could feel myself shrinking during that conversation, like I was 12 years old again and being scolded for not going along with whatever Jackson wanted. After that, things went quiet, suspiciously quiet. Jackson didn't reach out. No birthday call, no check-ins. I figured maybe he got over it, or at least decided to tolerate me until after the wedding. I was wrong. Because what started as a snide assumption about my property quickly morphed into something much uglier. The wedding invitations went out 6 months before the big day. Mine arrived late, and unlike everyone else's, it didn't include a +1. That stung a little. I'm not dating anyone, but the exclusion felt targeted. Like they were making it clear I was being tolerated, not welcomed. I RSVP'd yes anyway. I figured if I didn't go, it would only give Jackson another reason to paint me as the black sheep. And honestly, part of me wanted to be there. I wanted to see who else in the family would show their true colors, now that the lines were starting to be drawn. About 2 weeks before the wedding, I got a call from my Aunt Marlene. She's one of the few people in the family who's always treated me kindly. She told me, off the record, that Jackson had been bragging at a family barbecue, when I wasn't invited to, that he was working on getting the beach house signed over before the wedding so Brooke and he could finally have their own summer getaway. Apparently, he'd already shown her photos of the house and mentioned remodeling plans. I was stunned, furious, but mostly, I just felt betrayed. It was like he didn't even see me as a person with boundaries, just an obstacle between him and something he thought he deserved. I didn't know whether to confront him or just show up at the wedding and let him try whatever he was planning, but either way, I wasn't going to roll over. The final straw, the moment I knew things were going to get bad, came just days before the wedding. I received an envelope in the mail from Jackson's legal consultant. It wasn't a law firm, just a guy he knew from college who worked in real estate. The letter inside was written in overly casual language, basically suggesting that I transfer ownership of the beach house to Jackson and Brooke as a wedding gift and symbol of family unity. It even had a draft deed attached with my name already typed in the grantor box. No request, no conversation, just a piece of paper that screamed entitlement. I didn't respond. I didn't yell. I didn't call anyone. But in that moment, something hardened in me. I was done playing nice. I didn't know how yet, but I was going to make sure that Jackson learned, in front of everyone, that he couldn't manipulate me into submission. And as fate would have it, the perfect moment arrived at his wedding reception, when he dumped champagne over my head in front of 200 guests. He thought it was funny, but someone at table 4, someone he didn't expect, stood up. And what they shouted, it wiped the smile off his face completely. I showed up to Jackson's wedding with my suit pressed, my shoes shined, and a calm expression that betrayed the war going on inside my head. I wasn't there to cause a scene, not yet, but I wasn't going to be a doormat, either. The venue was a high-end coastal resort about 40 minutes from my beach house. Everything about it screamed, look how successful I am. White roses wrapped around marble columns, a string quartet under a canopy, servers in tuxedos gliding past with silver trays. Even the gift table had a velvet rope. I nodded politely to extended family I hadn't seen in years. Some hugged me tightly. Others gave me a half smile like they weren't sure where I stood in the unspoken family feud that had taken root ever since Grandpa's will came out. I didn't bring it up. I didn't need to. The tension was already thick enough to chew. The ceremony itself was beautiful, I'll give them that. Brooke looked stunning in her lace-trimmed dress, and Jackson, ever the showman, wiped a theatrical tear during his vows. People awed. My mother dabbed her eyes with a tissue. I clapped like everyone else, even as a voice in the back of my head whispered, "He's only crying because he thinks he just married his way into a beach house." At the reception, they sat me at table 11, way in the back corner near the kitchen doors. You know, the table where they stick the relatives they'd rather not acknowledge unless there's a photo op. My name card was slightly bent, like it had been thrown on at the last minute. I looked around and saw that everyone else in our immediate family was seated closer to the front, near the head table. Aunt Marlene sat next to me. "Don't take it personally," she whispered as we toasted with flat champagne. "I overheard Brooke saying they didn't want you killing the vibe. Whatever that means." I smiled tightly. "She's afraid I'll remind Jackson that I exist without kneeling." Marlene smirked, but said nothing. She knew better than to add fuel. She had to keep peace with the rest of the family. After all, dinner came and went, and it wasn't long before people were up dancing, mingling, and making speeches. The MC kept things moving with cheesy dad jokes and forced enthusiasm. Meanwhile, I kept one eye on the bar and one on Jackson, who seemed to be getting drunk off his own ego more than anything in a bottle. He kept gesturing grandly, hugging guests like a politician, whispering in Brooke's ear as they shared smug smiles. I should have left. Every bone in my body told me I didn't belong there. But I stayed because something about that night felt like a final exam, like I was supposed to witness all of it before whatever came next. I sipped my watered-down cocktail and waited. Then came the family tributes. Brooke's maid of honor gave a sweet, if overly rehearsed, speech about their sorority days and how Jackson made Brooke laugh every single day. My mother followed with a speech that started out sentimental and somehow veered into a lecture about how important it is to support your older siblings, especially when they're building a new chapter in their lives. I kept a straight face even as half the room turned to glance at me during that line. And then, as if on cue, Jackson took the mic. He wasn't supposed to give a speech, at least not yet, but he swaggered onto the dance floor, waved the MC away, and flashed that practiced, charming grin. "Ladies and gentlemen," he began, "I know tonight is about love and unity and all that jazz, but I just want to take a moment to acknowledge someone very special in my life." I knew he was talking about me before he even turned toward the back of the room. My little brother, Carter. Scattered applause. A few confused claps. I froze in place, still holding my drink. "Now Carter," Jackson continued, "isn't exactly a spotlight kind of guy. He's more of a porch-sitting, ocean-watching, book-reading kind of guy." He chuckled. "But he's always been there. And while we don't always see eye to eye, I know deep down he loves his family." He raised his glass. "So Carter, thanks for coming. And thank you, in advance, for the incredible wedding gift you're going to give us." I blinked. A ripple went through the crowd. Brooke giggled, hiding her face behind her hands. My father gave a single approving nod, like this was all part of some rehearsed performance. I felt the blood drain from my face. This wasn't a speech, it was a setup. Jackson went on. "You see, Carter has this gorgeous little beach house. Some of you have seen it. It's right on the water, breezy, perfect for summer getaways. It belonged to our grandfather, who always said family came first. And Carter, in his quiet wisdom, has decided to honor that tradition." He looked at me then, smiling, daring me, by giving us the keys as a symbolic gesture. A new beginning for a new family. The room erupted in applause. People whistled. Someone at another table yelled, "That's so generous." I stood up, slowly. My chair scraping against the floor made a loud, awkward sound. I was still holding my drink, still trying to process the public ambush I'd just walked into. Jackson raised his eyebrows. "Carter, you want to say a few words?" I stared at him. Every nerve in my body was telling me to explode, to yell, to call him a liar. But all I did was shake my head and sit back down. I wasn't going to give him the satisfaction. Aunt Marlene leaned over and whispered. That was low, even for him. "I'm fine," I lied. My heart was pounding so hard it felt like it might break through my ribs. The next 30 minutes were a blur. People came over to thank me. Some hugged me. One guy even asked if I'd rent the place to him when Jackson wasn't using it. I had to excuse myself to the restroom just to breathe. When I got back to the table, my phone buzzed. It was a text from Jackson. "Smooth move. Just go with it. You'll look better if you don't make a scene." I stared at the screen. My jaw clenched. My fingers hovered over the keyboard, but I didn't type anything. Not yet. The DJ called everyone to the floor for the first dance. I watched from the sidelines as Jackson and Brooke swayed to a painfully generic Ed Sheeran song, both of them grinning like they'd already won. I could feel the tension in my shoulders build like a tidal wave that hadn't yet crashed. And then came the champagne. After the dance, after the toasts, after the cake had been cut, Jackson came over to me holding a fresh flute of bubbly. His cheeks were flushed with alcohol and self-satisfaction. He clinked the glass against mine. "Seriously," he said, loud enough for nearby guests to hear. "You're doing the right thing. Bro Grandpa would be proud." "I never agreed to give you the house," I said calmly. Jackson smirked. Sure. But you didn't say no. And that was your shot." Before I could reply, he raised his glass higher and, with one flick of his wrist, poured it over my head. It wasn't subtle. It wasn't accidental. It was slow, deliberate. Every drop of champagne sliding down my forehead felt like gasoline on fire. A collective gasp swept through the room. Chairs scraped back. People stopped mid-conversation. I could feel 200 pairs of eyes lock onto me, some horrified, some amused, all silent. Jackson laughed. "Just christening the new deed holder," he shouted. "It's a family tradition." Brooke laughed, too. My mother looked stunned, but not enough to say anything. My father just sipped his scotch like he wasn't witnessing a public humiliation. I didn't move. I didn't wipe it off. I stood there, dripping, watching Jackson double over with laughter like it was the funniest thing he'd ever done. And then it happened. A voice from across the room, sharp and commanding, cut through the noise like a gavel. "That's enough." The room went dead silent. Heads turned. From table 4, the one with all the professionals, apparently, a man in a navy suit stood up. He was tall, mid-50s, silver hair, with the kind of voice that made people instinctively listen. "I'm sorry," he said, looking directly at Jackson. "But what you just did, that was assault and public coercion." Jackson's face went pale. The man stepped forward, slipping something from his inner jacket pocket. "I'm a real estate attorney, and unless Carter here has signed anything willingly, you're not getting your hands on anything except a possible lawsuit." The champagne dripping down my collar suddenly felt cold. Jackson opened his mouth, but no words came out. And just like that, the mask started to crack. The silence that followed the lawyer's outburst was thick enough to slice with a steak knife. Everyone had turned. Faces frozen mid-laugh, eyes wide with confusion or secondhand embarrassment. I could still feel the champagne soaking into my shirt collar, the bubbles trailing down the back of my neck like cold fingers. Jackson stood there across from me, still holding the empty flute, his hand trembling just slightly now. His tan had gone a shade lighter. His jaw tightened, but the cocky grin was gone. The man from table 4 walked closer, his polished shoes tapping against the marble tiles. He wasn't smiling. "I'm not trying to ruin your wedding," he said, keeping his voice level. "But I am not going to sit by and watch you humiliate someone over property that clearly doesn't belong to you." He turned to me. "Are you all right?" I nodded slowly, trying to find my voice. "Yeah, just surprised." The man handed me a business card. "Ronald Berkeley. I specialize in estate law. If he sends you anything else, letters, emails, documents, you call me. I'll handle it." Jackson stepped in then, trying to regain control. All right, let's not blow this out of proportion. It was just a joke." "A joke?" Ronald shot back. "You publicly implied your brother gave you property he legally owns. Then you doused him with alcohol in front of 200 witnesses. I'd love to hear how that plays in court." The DJ, trying to salvage the mood, turned the music back on, something upbeat and loud enough to drown out the tension. But the damage was done. The bubble had popped. Jackson's friends slowly peeled away, returning to their tables like nothing happened. Brooke, her face flushed and her smile twitching at the corners, grabbed Jackson by the wrist and hissed something in his ear before dragging him toward the exit of the ballroom. I wiped my face with a napkin someone handed me. I think it was Marlene, and took a shaky breath. For the first time in my adult life, someone had stepped in for me. Without hesitation, without second-guessing. And for once, Jackson didn't get away with his theatrics. That should have felt like the end of the story. But it wasn't. The real betrayal came after. Not 5 minutes later, my mother approached me, face tight with discomfort, like she'd just walked barefoot across broken glass to get to me. Her voice was soft, apologetic, the way she used to sound when she was trying to tell me something awful while pretending it wasn't. "Carter," she said, gently grabbing my wrist. Could we talk outside? I followed her to a small garden patio behind the ballroom. It was quieter there, away from the music and whispers. String lights overhead cast a soft glow on the hedges and brick path. It almost felt peaceful, until she turned to me and said, "Do you really have to be so dramatic?" I stared at her. "Excuse me." She sighed, like I was a burden. "It's your brother's wedding day. Couldn't you have just smiled and let it go?" "Let it go," I repeated. He publicly lied about me giving him my house. He humiliated me in front of everyone. Mom looked away, arms crossed. "He didn't mean it like that." I scoffed. "You were there. You saw what happened." She shook her head. "You're too sensitive, Carter. Always have been. Jackson was just making a point. You've been holding onto that house like it's a weapon." I couldn't believe what I was hearing. My voice dropped. "It's mine, Mom. He has no right to it." "But you know what it means to the family," she said quickly, like she'd been rehearsing that line for months. "Your grandfather should have left it to all of us." "But he didn't," I snapped. "He left it to me. Because I was the only one who spent time with him in that house. Because I was the only one who cared." She winced. "That's not fair." "What's not fair?" I said, trying to keep my voice from cracking. "Is that every time Jackson pushes me, you back him. Every time he takes something too far, you find a way to make it my fault. Even now." "I'm not taking sides," she said. "Yes, you are," I said. "And you always have." She stepped back like I'd slapped her. I expected her to argue, to raise her voice. Instead, she looked at me with this exhausted disappointment, not in Jackson, but in me. "Carter," she said slowly, "you need to stop making things harder than they have to be. He's your brother. And I'm your son," I said. "But you never seem to remember that when he's in the room." She didn't reply, just turned and walked back inside, leaving me standing there alone. I thought that was the low point. But the real gut punch came the next morning. I got a text at 6:48 a.m. from Brooke. "Hey Carter, just wanted to check in and say no hard feelings about last night. Jackson might have gone a little overboard, but we really are hoping to make some special memories in that house this summer. We're looking at July 1st to 15th. Hope that works for you. Let me know if you need the address to send the keys." I stared at the message for a full minute before I could even process it. There was no apology, no acknowledgement of what had happened. Just an assumption, no, a demand, wrapped in a pink bow. I didn't reply. I didn't know how to reply. A few hours later, another message came in. This one from my dad. "Your mother's worried. Please call her. And don't make this about the house again. We've all had enough drama." I nearly laughed out loud. I was the drama. That afternoon, I drove back home, to my own house, in silence. Every familiar turn in the road felt heavier. I pulled into my driveway, walked up the weather-worn steps, and sat on the porch. The sea breeze carried the smell of salt and sand, the air cool against my still damp dress shirt. I hadn't even changed. I'd driven the whole way in that champagne-soaked outfit like it was armor I wasn't ready to take off yet. I sat there until the sun started to dip toward the water, watching the sky burn orange and gold, thinking about how fast things had spiraled, about how much I had ignored over the years. All the little jabs, the casual dismissals, the favoritism, the guilt trips disguised as family values. I thought about every time I'd kept quiet just to avoid being called too sensitive. And I realized something. This wasn't just about the beach house. It never was. This was about respect, about boundaries, about being seen as a full person and not just a placeholder in someone else's script. That night, I went inside, made myself a simple dinner, and pulled out a locked wooden box from the closet. Inside was my grandfather's original will, a notarized copy. I'd kept it there not out of paranoia, but because it mattered to me. Because that house wasn't just property. It was a place of peace, of belonging. A legacy that he chose to leave to me. As I looked over the papers again, a thought began to form. A plan, slow and careful. Because if they wanted a war, I wasn't going to fight it on their terms. They wanted a house. I was going to give them something else entirely. But not yet. Because first, I had to find out just how far Jackson was willing to go. And he didn't make me wait long. A few days later, I got a letter in the mail. Not a text. Not a phone call. An envelope. Inside was a formal request, drafted by a different lawyer, not Ronald from Table 4. This one from a firm I didn't recognize. It read, "Per previous verbal agreement at the wedding reception, we are requesting that you sign and return the enclosed quitclaim deed by the end of the month." This will allow for the peaceful and timely transfer of the property located at my beach house address into the joint ownership of Mr. Jackson, last name, and Mrs. Brooke, last name. Verbal agreement? He was trying to use the wedding speech as legal proof that I'd agreed to sign over the house. I read the letter 3 times before setting it down. My hands were steady. My heartbeat wasn't. Because now it was real. He wasn't just hinting anymore. He was coming for it. And I was done playing defense. The letter sat on my kitchen table for days. Every morning, I'd walk past it, unopened after that first read, trying to convince myself it was just a bluff. That Jackson had gone too far, and anyone in the family would step in and tell him to knock it off. That surely, Brooke wouldn't let him do this. That my parents, who had always preached, family comes first, would remember I was family too. But no one called. No one knocked on my door. And the letter stayed right there, like a loaded trap I wasn't supposed to see coming. I didn't tell anyone at work what was going on, though I'm sure they could tell something was off. I was quieter, more withdrawn. I'd stare at spreadsheets without really seeing them, fingers hovering over the keyboard without typing. I started taking long lunches, not to go anywhere, just to sit in my car and listen to the waves crash through my rolled-down window. There was something about the sound of the ocean that made it both easier and harder to breathe. That week, I stopped answering family group chats. I didn't pick up when Mom called twice, or when Dad left me a voicemail saying, "We just want to smooth things over. Don't be unreasonable, Carter." I stopped opening social media altogether. I couldn't stand seeing tagged photos from the wedding, or worse, smiling comments from people I hadn't spoken to in years congratulating Jackson and Brooke on their new beach property. Their words, new beach property, like I had handed them the keys with a red bow. The worst moment came one evening when I pulled into the driveway after a grocery run and noticed something odd. The porch light was on. I hadn't left it on. A chill ran through me. I parked quickly, grabbed a flashlight from the glove box, and approached the house cautiously. As I stepped onto the porch, I noticed footprints in the sand trailing up from the beach. Not mine. My front door was closed, but not locked. That part stopped me cold. I always locked it. Always. Muscle memory, habit, paranoia, call it what you want, but I never left that door unlocked. I pushed it open slowly, flashlight in one hand, phone in the other. "Hello," I called out. Silence. I stepped inside. The living room was untouched. Kitchen, too. I checked the bathroom, the back porch, the guest room. Nothing out of place until I opened the door to my bedroom. And there, on my bed, was a manila envelope. Same law firm's logo stamped on the front. Inside, another quitclaim deed. Another letter, this one terser. "This is your final reminder. Our clients expect cooperation. Failure to respond will result in escalation." No signature, just initials. I sat down slowly on the edge of the bed, envelope in hand. He'd been here. Not just Jackson. No, he probably sent someone, but still. Someone had entered my home, without permission, and left paperwork on my bed like it was a hotel welcome packet. That night, I didn't sleep. I turned off every light, locked every window, and sat in the living room with a baseball bat across my lap, heart hammering in my ears like a metronome I couldn't shut off. I kept the porch light off this time. If they came back, I wanted to see them. I wanted to catch them in the act. But no one came. The next day, I filed a police report. I didn't name Jackson. I didn't accuse. I just stated the facts. That I came home to find my door unlocked, a stranger's footprints on my property, and legal documents left inside without my consent. The officer was polite but non-committal. Could have been a delivery, he offered. Maybe a paralegal. "I didn't request anything," I said. He shrugged. "Not much we can do unless you catch them in the act or have video. Maybe consider a camera system." So I bought one. A full set, doorbell, floodlight cam, motion sensors. I spent the weekend wiring it all up myself, every screw drilled with the tight-lipped precision of a man who had run out of second chances. Something shifted in me during that installation. A quiet resolve. I wasn't going to beg for fairness. I wasn't going to plead or reason or try to make anyone understand why this was wrong. I was done explaining myself to people who never listened. That same weekend, I drove to my grandfather's old storage unit. It had been cleaned out after his passing, but I'd kept a few boxes stored there, mostly his journals, some photos, and a few odds and ends no one else wanted. I found the box labeled Property Docs and pulled it down, fingers trembling slightly. Inside, receipts, letters, blueprints, and one very important binder, the kind of thing only someone from his generation would have assembled. Every record related to the house, tax assessments, repair logs, insurance policies dating back 30 years. He'd written notes in the margins with a black ballpoint pen. Fixed the roof after the hurricane. Replaced the dock with Carter, summer 2008. There was history in every page. My history. Later that night, I made a copy of the binder and dropped it off at Ronald Berkeley's office, the lawyer from the wedding. His assistant took it, eyes widening slightly when I told her what was inside. "Are you planning to take legal action?" she asked. "Not yet," I said, "but I want to be ready." She nodded. "We'll be in touch." The following week, the calls from Jackson started. First, casual. "Hey man, sorry about the champagne thing. Just got carried away. All good, right?" Then, passive-aggressive. "I don't know why you're being so cold about this. We're family. You said it at the wedding." Finally, hostile. "You think this house means something just because Grandpa gave it to you? That's not how legacy works. That's not how family works. You're being selfish." I blocked him. Next, Brooke tried. "Hey sweetie, listen, we're trying to coordinate the contractors for some minor updates. Just paint. Nothing major, but we need access to the interior. Can you send over the key code?" I didn't respond. I replaced the code the next day. Every step I took made it clearer. I wasn't safe with these people. Not emotionally. Not physically. Not legally. And the longer I stayed silent, the more they would keep pushing. But something else started happening, too. One by one, people began reaching out. Not to scold. Not to pressure. To apologize. A cousin I hadn't spoken to in years messaged me. "Didn't know all that went down at the wedding. Just wanted to say you handled yourself with class." A neighbor from down the beach called and said he'd seen a strange man near my porch that week. "Didn't look like you. Thought you should know." Even Aunt Marlene sent me an email. No subject line. Just, "I'm sorry. If I could go back and say something that night, I would've." And then a package. From my grandfather's attorney. Someone I hadn't contacted, but who had apparently been following the noise. Inside was a copy of a video. Grainy footage, but clear enough. My grandfather, seated in his old armchair, speaking directly to the camera. "This house goes to Carter," he said. "I'm putting that in writing, of course, but I want to say it plainly. He's the only one who ever treated it like more than property. He's the only one who treated me like more than a name in a will." He chuckled. "If Jackson tries anything, tell him I said no. Tell him I said heck no." I watched it 3 times. Then I closed the laptop and sat very still. Rock bottom, I realized, wasn't the moment Jackson poured champagne on my head. It wasn't the betrayal from my parents, or the silence, or the unlocked door. It was the moment I realized I had spent my entire adult life hoping for something I was never going to get. Validation. Fairness. An equal seat at the table. And I was done waiting. They wanted war. I was finally ready. But first, I had one last thing to do. Because someone had helped Jackson get that law firm involved. And I had a very good idea of who. I didn't start the next part of my life with some big speech or grand gesture. It began quietly, with a trip to the county clerk's office. I walked in on a drizzly Wednesday morning wearing jeans, a windbreaker, and a calm I hadn't felt in months. I had a folder tucked under one arm. The notarized will, the property records, the video transcript, and the letter Brooke had sent me requesting the house key for contractor access. That last one was highlighted and printed on company letterhead, a rare rookie move. The clerk behind the glass window greeted me with the same polite indifference I imagine she gave everyone. I slid the folder through the slot. "I'd like to place a formal notice on my property title," I said. "Preventative flag. There may be unauthorized attempts to claim or alter ownership." She raised an eyebrow. "You've got paperwork to support that?" I gave her a small smile. "Plenty." An hour later, I left the office with the paperwork filed and a legal freeze on any ownership transfers regarding the property. That meant even if someone tried to sneak something through, even with a forged signature or a shady notary, it would set off alarms and require a full investigation. That was my first real step out of the shadows. My first act of defense that felt like offense. And from there, things started to move. Ronald Berkeley called me that evening. "Got your documents," he said. I watched the video twice. Brilliant. Emotional. Clear intent. If they try to take this to court, we'll eat them alive. I exhaled slowly. "So, I'm not crazy, right?" Not even close, he said. You're one of the most level-headed clients I've ever had. You've documented everything. You've been patient. You've acted in good faith. That video, that seals the deal. I don't know what it was about hearing those words. Maybe just someone with authority confirming that I wasn't the villain in this story, but something inside me loosened. I actually laughed. A real, chest-deep laugh that caught me by surprise. Ronald wasn't just helpful. He was strategic. Over the next week, we drafted a formal cease and desist letter addressed to both Jackson and Brooke, as well as their law firm. It included evidence of coercion attempts, documentation of unauthorized property entry, a copy of the recorded will and video statement, and a warning that any further attempts to interfere with the property would result in legal action. We mailed it, emailed it, and served a copy directly to Jackson's office downtown. According to Ronald, it hit him right as he was walking into a client meeting. I didn't hear from Jackson after that, not for days. Not even a whisper. It was eerie, but peaceful. I used the quiet to rebuild my routines. I started waking up early again. The kind of early where you can still hear the foghorn in the distance and feel the ocean mist cling to your skin. I'd make coffee, sit on the porch wrapped in an old wool blanket, and just watch the tide come in. I started sketching again, something I hadn't done in years. Drafting little renovations I might one day make to the house. A sunroom off the back, a reading loft above the kitchen, maybe a tiny guest cabin tucked near the dune grass for the rare friend who visited. For the first time in a long time, I stopped thinking about them. And I started thinking about me. Word got around slowly. People in the family started to realize I wasn't caving. That I hadn't signed over anything. That I had gotten legal help and wasn't afraid to use it. Some reacted with silence. Some, like Aunt Marlene, became quietly supportive. She dropped off a pie one Sunday afternoon and sat with me on the porch. No lectures, no pity, just quiet conversation about Grandpa and the garden he never quite managed to grow. Others tried to pivot. One of Jackson's groomsmen messaged me on Instagram with a clumsy, "Hey man, just wanted to say I admire how you're standing up for yourself." I didn't reply. 2 days later, he deleted the message. But the real shift happened when a local architecture firm, small, community-driven, mostly coastal restoration work, reached out after seeing my name mentioned in a real estate newsletter. The founder, Beth, had read about my grandfather's house years ago in a feature on historic beach properties. "We're working on a preservation project up the coast," she said over the phone. "Saw your family name come up recently and thought, I don't know, maybe you'd want to get involved." I hesitated. I'm not a licensed architect. I just draw. "Then draw," she said. "We'll handle the licenses. Come in and meet the team." So I did. I brought in a portfolio of old sketches, some I'd done as a teenager, others just weeks old, and they flipped through them like they were seeing treasure maps. Beth offered me a freelance contract on the spot. Not full-time, not yet, but enough to get my hands dirty again. Enough to feel useful. I started spending 2 or 3 days a week in their little studio space, consulting on layouts, offering design ideas, helping with mock-ups. The team was kind, down to earth. No one made me feel like an outsider. They respected my ideas, even when I second-guessed myself. That job, small as it was, changed everything. It gave me momentum, purpose, a sense that maybe, just maybe, the beach house wasn't a burden or a source of drama. Maybe it was my beginning. That's when I started the blog. I named it Salt and Sawdust, a little nod to Grandpa's woodworking shed out back. I posted photos of the house, the renovation plans I'd drawn, memories from summers past. I wrote short pieces about coastal living, building things with your hands, preserving family legacies without losing yourself. At first, only a few people read it, then a few dozen, then a few hundred. Within 2 months, I was getting emails from people across the country. Some shared stories of houses they'd inherited. Others asked for help designing their own beach cabins. One woman from Maine sent me a photo of a front porch her father had built in 1961, asking how to keep the wood from rotting in salty air. I answered every message. And the more I gave, the more came back. Traffic to the blog spiked. A local lifestyle magazine reached out for an interview. A regional podcast asked if I'd talk about coastal resilience and family preservation. I laughed at first, me on a podcast, but I did it. And people listened. And slowly, something strange happened. My name stopped being Jackson's brother and became Carter. Carter with the beach house. Carter with the stories. Carter with the calm voice and steady hands and quiet stubbornness that finally made sense to the people who once overlooked me. Of course, not everyone liked that. Jackson sent one last email. Short. Cold. Congrats on your little blog. You win. Hope it was worth it. I didn't reply. I didn't need to. Because by then, it wasn't about winning. It was about becoming. I wasn't the quiet little brother anymore. I wasn't the side character in Jackson's story. I wasn't the weird kid who read architectural journals instead of throwing footballs. I was building something, and they couldn't take it from me. But even as my life was improving, even as peace started to grow around me like sea grass after a storm, I knew the storm hadn't passed. Jackson wasn't done. He never walked away from something he thought he deserved. And while I was finally standing tall, I could feel the next wave forming in the distance. And this time, I was ready for it. The waves had been calm for too long. It had been 6 weeks since Jackson's last email. 6 weeks since that limp, hope it was worth it message had landed in my inbox like a final, half-hearted slap. I thought maybe he'd finally accepted it. That the house wasn't his to take. That I wasn't going to fold. That the old dynamic, him demanding, me apologizing, had died the day he poured champagne on my head. But of course, I should have known better. Jackson doesn't let go. He bides time. He regroups. He waits for the narrative to tilt in his favor again. And then he strikes. I got a call from a woman named Sheila, a senior permit officer for the county. Friendly voice, very professional. She'd stumbled across my name while reviewing an application for a remodel permit for my beach house. Just wanted to verify some details, she said. There's a discrepancy in the ownership name listed versus what's on file. My stomach dropped. Someone submitted a permit for my house. Yes. Full roof remodel and rear extension. They listed Jackson, last name, as the owner and included blueprints. I swallowed. Do you have the blueprints handy? I do, she said. Want me to email them? 5 minutes later, I was staring at a PDF titled Brook Beach Retreat, Final Draft. It was stamped with the logo of a high-end design firm from LA. I flipped through the pages, my heart pounding harder with each click. Open-plan kitchen, glass-railed second-floor balcony, luxury sauna, wraparound sun deck. And on the bottom corner of every page, property, 317, Shoreline Avenue. Owner, Jackson and Brooke, last name. I sat back in my chair, stunned. He hadn't just tried to steal the house. He'd moved on to redesigning it, planning it, branding it, Brook Beach Retreat. It sounded like a spa influencer's Airbnb fantasy. They'd taken my grandfather's quiet, weathered cottage and turned it into a magazine cover. On paper, anyway. I didn't know whether to laugh or scream. He had no deed, no legal claim, but he'd submitted this permit, fully expecting no one to check. That was his fatal mistake, because in doing so, he'd put it all in writing. And it gave me an idea, a dangerous, satisfying, surgical idea. First, I called Ronald. I need a copy of the property deed, I said. One with the county seal and a time-stamped affidavit confirming ownership. He chuckled. Someone making trouble again? Oh, you have no idea. Second, I called Sheila back and explained, calmly, that Jackson was not the owner, had never been the owner, and had never lived in the property. I forwarded her the deed and Ronald's letter. She apologized profusely and assured me that the application would be flagged, denied, and investigated. Submitting fraudulent information on a permit is a big deal, she said carefully. There could be penalties. I thanked her and hung up, hands trembling slightly, not from fear, but anticipation. Because now I had something real, something usable, but I needed more. So I did what I hadn't done in months. I went to visit my parents. They were surprised to see me. It was a Sunday morning, and the kitchen smelled like old coffee and cinnamon rolls. My mother blinked when she saw me at the door, apron on, flowers smudged across her cheek. Carter, I nodded. Hi, Mom. Can I come in? Dad was at the table with the paper, still in his robe. He lowered the page slowly. Everything all right? I shrugged. Just thought we should talk. They were cautious, as if they expected an ambush. I didn't blame them. I'd been cold and distant. I'd blocked numbers, ignored texts. I'd made it clear they weren't exactly in my corner. But now, I needed something. So I sat down, smiled politely, and said, Did Jackson ever ask you to co-sign anything? For the house? That got their attention. My mother's brow furrowed. What do you mean? I mean, did he ever show you documents, letters, ask for signatures? Anything that looked official? She shook her head. No, never. What? My father, however, was quiet. His eyes narrowed slightly, not in suspicion, but in memory. What? He rubbed his chin. A few months ago, maybe right after the engagement, he mentioned needing a letter of family verification for a mortgage application. Something about proving property access. My pulse skipped. What did you give him? I asked, trying to keep my voice even. Nothing, Dad said. I told him to talk to you directly. I exhaled. Good. Because he just tried to file a remodel permit in his name. Listed himself as the owner. My mother gasped. That can't be right. I pulled out my phone and showed them the blueprints. Brook Beach Retreat. Her name across every page like she'd already claimed it. I watched my mother's mouth fall open as she scrolled. This is your house. Why would he? Because he thinks he can wear me down, I said. And maybe, because he thinks no one will stop him. There was a long silence. Then, finally, my father said something I never expected to hear. I'll testify if you need me to. I looked up. I'm serious, he said. This is beyond family bickering. He's crossing lines. My mother nodded, slower. We never wanted to pick sides, Carter. But maybe we should have stepped in sooner. I didn't say I told you so. I didn't say anything at all. I just nodded, stood, and said, thank you. Back in the car, I sat there with the engine off, staring at my reflection in the rearview mirror. There was a quiet strength in my face that hadn't been there months ago. Less fear, more resolve. This wasn't about payback. Not really. This was about ending something. Ending the cycle, the manipulation, the entitlement. I drove back home and set the next part of my plan in motion. I pulled up the blog, Salt and Sawdust, and started writing a new post. This time, I wasn't subtle. I told the story of a coastal home passed down through generations. A grandson trying to preserve its legacy. A relative who wanted to turn it into a personal resort. I didn't name names, but anyone who knew. The post went viral. It was shared hundreds of times in local Facebook groups, picked up by a real estate ethics forum. Commenters flooded in, sharing their own stories of inheritance theft, of pushy siblings, of families fractured by greed. Somewhere in that flood of comments, someone wrote, sounds like your brother tried to file a remodel permit illegally. That's a felony in some counties. Another wrote, I'm a property attorney in Oregon. If you ever want to talk about civil recovery options, hit me up. It snowballed from there. 3 days later, I got a message from a local news reporter who covered community property disputes and zoning issues. She wanted to do a feature. Said she'd been following the blog for weeks and felt the story captured something deeply relatable. I hesitated. I didn't want to torch the bridge. But then again, maybe the bridge was already gone. So I agreed to the interview, under one condition, no names. Just the story, the struggle, the fight to preserve not just a house, but a legacy. The piece ran a week later. The house he fought for, when family legacy meets entitlement. It blew up. I started getting invites to speak at community panels. The architecture firm offered me more hours. They wanted to expand the preservation division. One of their clients wanted me to design a beach-facing guest house modeled after mine. I got offered a side gig consulting for a podcast about inheritance disputes. Every step forward made Jackson's silence louder. Until finally, he broke it. A manila envelope appeared on my porch. Inside, a handwritten note. I thought this was between us. I didn't think you'd turn it into a sob story. You made me look like a thief. I folded the note carefully, set it aside, and smiled. Because that's exactly what he was. And soon, everyone else would know it too. Because thanks to the remodel permit, I had found something buried deep in the paperwork, something he never thought I'd notice. A loan. Backdated. Against property he didn't own. And with that, I didn't just have the high ground. I had a weapon. I didn't rush the revenge. That's the thing about justice, the real kind. It's slow. It's deliberate. It builds, brick by brick, until the person who tried to climb over you suddenly finds themselves sealed in a box of their own making. And Jackson? He built his box with a smile on his face. See, after the remodel permit fiasco, I did some digging. That blueprint PDF had been watermarked by a firm in LA. I called and asked some polite questions, posing as a curious client, interested in their design services. The receptionist mentioned they had just wrapped up a consultation for a high-end private beach project in our area, which they described as already partially financed. Partially financed. Those two words rang louder than any alarm. I reached out to Ronald immediately. "We need to pull public loan records tied to my property address," I said. "Someone might have taken out money against my deed." He got to work that same day. By Thursday morning, I was sitting in his office as he slid a manila folder across the table. Inside, gold. Jackson had applied for a private bridge loan through a boutique lender in Los Angeles, using my property as part of the loan's collateral package. Not the title. He didn't have that, but he had submitted documents claiming intent to acquire the house. The application included his wedding speech as verbal confirmation, a fake email from me supposedly stating I was considering the transfer, and the remodel permits as proof of preliminary investment. The loan wasn't huge, around $120,000, but that didn't matter, because he had used fraudulent documents to secure it. And fraud opens doors. Not for Jackson, for me. "We can go two ways with this," Ronald said. "File a civil suit for damages, or—" He paused. "Or we take it to the state licensing board." I raised an eyebrow. "He's not a contractor." "No," Ronald said slowly. "He's a financial advisor with a Series 65 license, which means he's legally obligated to disclose everything. Any criminal complaint, any ethics violation, any fraud accusation." My heart skipped. And if he doesn't? Best case scenario, he's suspended. Worst case, he's blacklisted. Permanently. That was the key. The button. The final thread in a sweater he'd been yanking at for years. I looked at Ronald and nodded. "Let's do both." And so it began. We filed a formal complaint with the state financial licensing board, including all the evidence. The fake remodel permits. The fraudulent collateral documents. Screenshots of Brooks' message about contractors needing access. The fake email supposedly from me. A notarized affidavit from Sheila at the permit office confirming the submission. And of course, my grandfather's video, which we labeled simply as Exhibit E. The board opened an investigation within a week. 2 days after that, we served Jackson with notice of a pending civil suit for attempted property fraud and financial misrepresentation. I didn't send it to his house. I had it delivered to his office, in front of his coworkers, by a professional process server who, I later learned, announced it loudly in the lobby. "Mr. Jackson, last name, you've been served." Civil suit. Fraud. Poetic. I wasn't there to see it, but a friend of a friend, someone who worked in the same building, said he went white as chalk and locked himself in his office for hours. Brooke showed up at my house that evening. Not texting, not calling, just showing up, high heels sinking into the sand, posture tight as piano wire. I met her on the porch. She didn't ask to come in. She just said, "What are you doing?" I crossed my arms. "Following the law. Something you two should have considered." Her lips curled. "You know this will ruin him." I didn't flinch. "He tried to steal my house, Brooke." She hesitated. "He made a mistake." "No," I said. "He made a plan. And then he built a lie around it. Then he forged documents. Then he lied to a bank. This wasn't an accident. This was arrogance." She didn't reply, just stared at me for a long moment, like she was trying to figure out if I'd always been this person or if the house had somehow made me this way. Finally, she said, "You're not who I thought you were." I nodded. "You're exactly who I thought you were." She left without another word. The lawsuit didn't take long to gain traction. When Jackson's financial firm learned about the complaint, they suspended him pending investigation. The licensing board started reviewing his entire portfolio. Clients were notified. His name was quietly pulled from the website. Whispers turned into phone calls. Phone calls turned into meetings. And suddenly, Jackson wasn't Jackson anymore. He was a liability. But it wasn't just the legal fire closing in on him. It was the personal fallout. I'd never gone public with his name. Never posted it online. Never outed him in my blog or to the news. But someone else did. A whistleblower, maybe a colleague, maybe an ex-client, submitted a tip to a watchdog site for financial ethics. Jackson's name was posted, along with redacted court documents and summaries of the complaint. It went viral in the worst possible way. His LinkedIn went dark. His wedding photos disappeared from social media. Brooke deactivated her Instagram. And then came the cherry on top. A call from a man named Devin Ashmore, an independent real estate investor who had apparently seen the article, read my blog, and done some digging of his own. "I have a proposition," he said. Normally, I would have been wary. But Devin wasn't calling to offer me money for the house. He was calling to partner. Turns out, Devin had recently purchased a strip of properties up the coast. Old cabins. Historical significance. He wanted to convert them into an eco-resort without tearing them down. He wanted to preserve their bones. And he wanted me to help design it. "You've got an eye for this," he said. "Your story's compelling. You've got an audience. People like you." I accepted. That gig doubled my income overnight. But more than that, it gave me something Jackson had always tried to hoard for himself: reputation. He had taken shots at me for years, called me passive, called me selfish, called me irrelevant. Now, I was building something. Publicly. Respectfully. While he was tearing everything he had down, brick by brick, just trying to keep his ego afloat. The civil suit didn't make it to trial. His lawyer begged for a settlement. We agreed on my terms. A formal written apology. A financial settlement to cover legal fees and damages. And a public admission of the fraudulent loan documents. I didn't need the money. I needed the paper trail. He signed it. And with that, the war was over. But I didn't throw a party. I didn't gloat. I just walked out to the beach that night, barefoot in the sand, waves crashing against the shore, and let myself breathe, really breathe, for the first time in what felt like years. I looked up at the stars, hands in my pockets, and whispered, "You'd be proud, Grandpa." Because in the end, the house stayed mine. The story became mine. And Jackson? He finally had to learn what it felt like to lose. Not because I screamed louder, but because I stood still while everything he built on lies came crashing down. The fallout wasn't dramatic. It was quiet, slow, the kind of unraveling that doesn't happen in explosions, but in silence, one thread pulled at a time until there's nothing left but frayed edges and empty space. After Jackson signed the settlement, the first thing I noticed was how quickly people stopped speaking about him in the present tense. He wasn't Jackson's firm anymore. His name was stripped from the financial company's website within 72 hours. The firm released a carefully worded statement about their continued commitment to ethical practices and thanked clients for their patience during the recent review of internal personnel. He wasn't Jackson the advisor anymore either. His license was suspended for 18 months after the board concluded their investigation, citing documented acts of unethical misrepresentation and abuse of influence in a private financial arrangement. That might not sound like much, but in his world, 18 months is a death sentence. You can't just snap your fingers and rebuild client trust. Not when your face shows up on professional blacklists. Not when former clients start Googling your name and find it connected to words like fraud and civil suit. He tried to pivot. For a brief moment, Jackson rebranded. He launched a vague consulting website, Ashcroft Advisory, with no last name, no photos, just stock images of handshakes and coffee meetings. It lasted 3 weeks. The site disappeared after a few negative comments started circulating. People linking to the original complaint, the court filing, the news article. The truth always finds its way to the surface. Brooke filed for divorce 3 months after everything settled. I didn't hear about it directly. I found out through Aunt Marlene, who came by the house one Sunday with a basket of tangerines from her garden and a weary look in her eyes. "They're separating," she said as we sat on the porch. She moved back in with her sister. I just nodded. Marlene hesitated before adding, "She's telling people she didn't know. About the loan, the permit, everything." "She knew," I said quietly. "Maybe not all of it, but enough." She didn't argue, just looked out toward the water and said, "Your grandfather would have handled it worse, you know. I once saw him throw a hammer through the garage door over a broken pressure valve." That made me laugh. "Yeah, he had a temper. But he also had a spine," she said. "Like you. The family, for what it's worth, recalibrated. Not overnight, but slowly. Mom came by a few times. No grand apology, just casseroles and gentle conversation. It was her way of reaching out. I accepted it for what it was. I didn't need groveling. I just needed space to be seen without judgment. Dad took longer. When he finally showed up, the day we finished rebuilding the old dock out back, he brought a 6-pack and a pair of work gloves. Didn't say much at first. Just stood beside me, looking out over the ocean as the sun dipped low. After a while, he said, "You were right." That was all. But it was enough. I didn't throw it in his face. I didn't ask why he took so long to say it. I just offered him a beer, and we sat there in silence, the kind that doesn't need to be filled. The architecture firm promoted me, not because of the blog or the media attention, though that helped, but because I'd proven I could see a vision through. that I could take something broken and restore it. Not just a house. A story. I now manage their coastal restoration division. I design homes for people who want more than luxury. People who want roots, heritage, meaning. It's not glamorous, but it's real. And salt and sawdust? It exploded. Not because of drama. Because people crave honesty. Every week, I get letters, real letters, in envelopes with stamps, from readers who say the blog gave them courage. To speak up. To stand their ground. To confront that sibling, that uncle, that greedy relative trying to rewrite history. One letter still sits on my desk, handwritten in delicate cursive. It reads, "Thank you. My sister tried to take my farmhouse after Mom passed. I let it happen because I was scared to cause a rift. Reading your story made me realize it was never about the house. It was about dignity. I called my lawyer this morning. I read that line often, because it reminds me that what happened wasn't just about me. It was about all the quiet people and families full of noise. The ones who are told to be the bigger person, to let it go, to avoid drama, while others take and take and take. But eventually, the quiet ones stop backing away. They find their footing. They learn how to speak. And when they do, it's not loud. It's not violent. It's surgical. Months passed. Seasons changed. And one morning, sometime in early spring, I got a knock at the door. It was Jackson. He looked older, thinner. The confident posture was gone. No sunglasses. No suit. Just jeans, a hoodie, and hands shoved deep into his pockets. I stepped onto the porch, closed the door behind me. We stood in silence for a moment, the waves crashing in the distance. "I'm not here to fight," he said finally. "I just wanted to see it again. One last time." I didn't reply. He looked at the porch swing, the restored shutters, the refinished door with Grandpa's old brass knocker still polished and bright. "I love this place, too, you know." "No," I said. "You loved owning it. There's a difference." He nodded, took that hit without flinching. "I lost everything," he said. "The job, Brooke, my reputation. You tried to steal something that wasn't yours. I thought I could get away with it. That much, at least, was honest." He looked at me then, not with anger, not with pride, with shame. "I'm not asking for forgiveness," he said. "I just wanted to say you were right. And I'm sorry." I didn't say anything, not because I wanted him to suffer, but because I truly didn't know how to respond. It was the first time in our entire lives that he'd admitted fault, and it didn't change anything. But it mattered. He turned to leave, paused at the stairs. "You'll do good things with this place," he said. "You already have." Then he walked away, down the steps, across the sand, and into the morning fog. I haven't seen him since. I don't know where he went. I don't ask. That part of the story is over. Now, the beach house is mine again, in every sense of the word. No lawsuits. No guilt. No shadows lurking around the edges. Just peace. Sunlight dances on the water every morning. The porch swing creaks in rhythm with the wind. My sketches fill the studio, and my coffee always tastes better when I drink it with the door open. Sometimes, I sit in Grandpa's old chair and think about the quiet fight it took to get here. The line I had to draw. The stand I had to make. And how, in the end, I didn't win because I shouted louder. I won because I never moved. And when people ask me now, was it worth it? The conflict? The family rift? The long road? I just smile. I point to the porch, to the sun rising over the water. And I say, this is mine. Every inch of it. And I didn't give it away.